Oh.
Of course, nobody's, not that many people are living there.
Okay, it's right.
Yeah.
Is your.
Okay.
Like that age was very physically exhausting. I like this age, it gets people out of the age, which is mentally exhausting.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Been a while since we've been together, but approve the minutes from the May 1st meeting. Does anybody need a copy of those? I do have some, not a lot.
I know I read them.
Okay.
I'll make a motion we approve.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Public comment?
Hello, is this on? Eileen Wayne, 51 Indian Hill Avenue. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again tonight. I'm here tonight representing the grade 5 team at Brownstone Intermediate School, which consists of Elizabeth Bayo, Kim Dietrichson, Natasha Diston, Allie Furlong, Courtney Peer, and myself. As the team that will remain at Brownstone if you decide to keep it open, we feel a deep responsibility to speak honestly about the current conditions and the implications of your decision. As you weigh this incredibly difficult choice, I want to share some of the daily realities inside our building. Realities that impact both student safety and the practicality of continuing to use Brownstone as an elementary school. As you know, Brownstone was built over 90 years ago as a high school. We have worked hard to make it function for 5th and 6th graders, but the building was never designed for children this young, and that's evident in both big and small ways. It is simply not safe or developmentally appropriate for students any younger than what we currently serve. One of our most urgent concerns is the outdoor setup for recess. The only space available, the fenced-in area we affectionately call the cage, requires students to cross an active parking lot to reach it. Think back to your own elementary school days. Recess meant freedom, excitement, and running outside to play. Our students are no different. They come racing down the stairs, eager to start a game of foursquare or basketball, but they aren't stopping to look both ways. They're kids. They come charging across a blind corner of our active parking lot. I've stood outside during recess and watched cars, vans, and even buses drive right through that space, not stopping at that blind corner, sometimes even running over the bright cones we placed to block traffic. Some drivers even use the BIS parking lot as a cut-through to avoid the red light on Main Street. The potential danger is very real. It has literally kept me up at night. Every time we send our students outside, we're holding our breath. And these are 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. We cannot imagine even asking younger students, 8 and 9-year-olds, to cross that same lot safely. It is simply not acceptable. What's facing the unknown that could amplify these safety concerns. A spa is being built right down the road. We have no idea what the impact on traffic will be once that business opens. Increased vehicles, visitors unfamiliar with the area, and the potential for congestion could all significantly increase the danger around our school. This is not just about a few more cars. It's about an environment becoming more predictable and less safe for children. We understand that some on this committee are concerned about losing Brownstone's auditorium, but we urge you to ask, is that truly essential for an elementary school? In reality, we rarely use it. Most elementary events like assemblies or performances can be held in gyms, cafeterias, or multi-purpose spaces that are much better suited to younger students' needs. The presence of an auditorium should not weigh more critical concerns. It's not a necessity. It's a nice to have. And we cannot prioritize preserving an auditorium over ensuring student safety. There's been a lot of talk about square footage. And yes, elementary teachers do love space. We spread out and make the most of any hallway or space we're given. But this decision cannot be based on square footage alone. Space is a real factor. It must be weighed against the daily lived experiences of students and staff. Right now, 5 of us teach in large classrooms at Brownstone. We know that if we are relocated to Gildersleeve or Valley View, our rooms will be significantly smaller. And that's okay, because we'll be in a safe, developmentally appropriate elementary school environment, and that matters more to us. The layout of the building poses significant challenges for younger children. With 3 floors and a long walk from classrooms to essential areas like the gym, the cafeteria, the main office, and the nurse's office, the design is not well suited to the developmental needs of elementary age students. Again, this building was originally constructed as a high school, and it shows. It's a lot to expect young children to navigate such a large, complex space multiple times a day. In contrast, the physical campuses at Valley View and Gildersleeve are far more appropriate for young learners. These schools were intentionally designed for elementary students, from their accessible layouts to their age-appropriate playgrounds. They weren't retrofitted to serve children. They were built for them. That thoughtful design makes a real difference in how students experience school each day, helping them feel more secure, confident, and capable in their learning environment. Brownstone's limitations are more than cosmetic. They affect supervision, safety, accessibility, and age-appropriate design. We respect the history of the building and its place in our town's story, but charm and character are not substitutes for safety and function. Nostalgia should never outweigh the needs of the children walking through its doors every day. A school must serve its students, not the other way around. When I spoke at a meeting several months ago, I outlined the daily challenges we face at Brownstone: extreme temperatures, poor air quality, significant structural issues, and ongoing safety concerns. Again, there's no denying that Brownstone is a beautiful historic building on Main Street, but beauty alone does not make it functional. It simply no longer meets the needs of today's students or staff. We make it work at Biz every day because that's what educators do. But our students deserve more than a building we simply make work. They deserve a modern, safe, and fully functional school that meets current educational, health, and safety standards. As you make this important decision, we urge you to consider not just what technically fits in a building, but what is truly best for our students in every way. On behalf of the grade 5 team, Elizabeth Bayo, Kim Dietrichson, Natasha Diston, Allie Furlong, Courtney Peer, and myself, thank you so much for your time, your dedication, and your thoughtful consideration. We are grateful for the chance to speak on behalf of our students, and we trust that you will keep their safety, well-being, and the development at the heart of this decision. Thank you.
Anybody else? Public comment? Or anybody? Nobody on it? Okay. Next would be our discussion with Friars.
That's it.
So.
Yeah, do you want me to, you guys want to come up? Like, let me just remind the committee of what our task was. So last time we met, you had asked me to go and develop, right, I had offered to develop this, which I emailed you, but I brought you hard copies, in anything, which is it's a generic education specifications plan. I didn't put a school on it. You'll see as you look through it, large parts of this report are incomplete because, if we were going to develop a plan for a school, whether it's Gildersleeve or Valley View, it would obviously need to be flagged out. So what I developed here was largely a generic ed specs plan, right? And even in the classroom spaces, I put, instead of like 1,100 square feet or 800 square feet, I just put within state space limits, right? Just so that we could have an understanding of the square footage that would get us or maximize our reimbursement from the state, which I think is really important to this community, is that, we leverage every local tax dollar against what could be encumbered in our percent reimbursement. I also put in the ed specs plan that for grades pre-K through 2, we like class sizes at 18. That's a class size that we're comfortable with. That's generally speaking what the Board of Ed and I have looked to. And that's why we always look at that number 90 for kindergarten. And if we go above 90, we look for the 6th section. If we're below 90, we're at 5 sections. So the reason I put in the ed specs plan a request to have 6 kindergarten, 6 grade 1 and 6 grade 2 classes is, if you remember, I looked at the Prouda report and identified that year when Prouda is saying over a 10-year period that we'd be at our maximum number of students in that projection. Prouda is actually, to be honest, a little under that, but I added several students to account for the Brainerd Place development, because when Peter Prouda was doing that demographic study, we were unsure exactly what would be zoned and approved. And at that point, if you remember, Brainerd was asking for some changes to the original plan. So the number that I put in there at that 307 number reflects Prouda's peak enrollment projection plus a few students added for to account for similar size projects. I think it was in Brookfield. And there's one other town that I called and asked for. So at that number, I was comfortable asking Mike and Bryce to take a look at how they could fit 6 kindergarten, 6 grade 1, 6 grade 2 classrooms, 2 pre-K classrooms, as well as office space, speech and language, cafeteria, and gym space, all in here within state space requirements to maximize potential reimbursement. I shared this very generic, not fully developed, because you asked me not to write it for Valley View or any one school, but to write it generically and provide it to Mike and Bryce, which I did. About 2 weeks ago. I also shared with you what I got back from Bryce, which was, and I'll pass this back out. You got this in an email from me. Their blocking diagram, which should give you a sense of where these classrooms could fit and how they could fit within the, again, generic ed specs plan that I wrote. And they're here tonight to talk to you about how the classrooms would fit, how it would work, what we would be looking at if we classify this project as a renovate to new Valley View to create a pre-K2 school. So with that said, Bryce, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know you have some renderings to show us and some ideas to share with us, and of course, how much this would cost, factoring in both local contribution and potential for state reimbursement. Again, if this committee were to recommend a renovate to new Valley View to create a pre-K2 school.
Thank you, guys. So this was just described the task with taking the educational specification that he put together, number of classrooms, and then doing a test fit within the existing footprint of the Valley View School. So as he mentioned, we have 6 kindergarten rooms, 2 pre-K rooms, 6 first grade rooms, 6 second grade rooms, as well as all the ancillary spaces that come with it, including cafeteria, admin. So just looking at this plan, we'll start in the bottom left-hand corner where the kindergarten rooms are. And it's important to mention there were no sizes for these classrooms dictated in the ed spec. So what we did was, based on our experience and the grade level and age of the children, sized the rooms appropriately based on our experience. So you'll see we have 6 kindergarten rooms down in this wing of the school within the existing footprint of the building, each one at about 950 square feet each. It's important also to note that these were sized taking into account the fact that kindergarten, preschool, and first grade all have a single occupancy toilet within each room. Moving across the floor plan, we have 2 preschool rooms here at the front of the school, kind of taking into account that when we start looking at site circulation, this would be a good location for them within the building for pickup and drop off, and adjacent to the admin area, which we have located at a location where the existing entry to the school is split into 2 sides. The idea here was this could be your main office, your principal's office, your reception. This could be a secure vestibule right here, and then this little admin suite across the hall, suite as well as a teacher's workroom and adjacent to the cafeteria. Cafeteria and kitchen is sized for a warming kitchen, as we discussed with Charles. We're thinking that could be up in this area, which leaves it open for delivery into that space right here, with a large cafeteria space adjacent to it. You have some special education rooms, math, ELL rooms, and other, like I said, ancillary spaces right next to, kind of right in the middle of the school, so that can easily be accessed by students of any age. Media center essentially stays where it is in its current location. Then you start with your first grades here across the hall. Again, first grades are about 875, 880 square feet, and include a toilet room within each space. Then you have your 6 second grade classrooms up here, sized at 800 square feet, without any toilet rooms. I do have to apologize. The copy of these plans that you have some square footages on them. I put the wrong slide in this presentation, but the the square footage for the building right now is at 43,000 square feet, 43,458. I want to make a quick comment about this. Last week, the state's website, state DOS Connecticut, they have updated their space standards calculation spreadsheet. So they have numbered that, you'll notice that that 43,000 number is not the same as what we discussed a few weeks ago. This was updated within the last week, I would say. And it increased by about 2,300 square feet. So it worked out in the favor of Portland. So that actually, that systems calculation spreadsheet is dated yesterday. So it's something came from the state, and they must have put onto the website a little early, but we found it and we applied it to this scenario. Moving up towards your existing gymnasium, including your music room, visual arts room, and your gymnasium. Gymnasium still is in about the same location, but if you can go on to the next slide, please. I've also just included a diagram showing the construction about 39,900 square feet and construction areas of proposed construction. So you'll see we kind of planned on blowing this wall out, adding a little square footage in here. Your classrooms are stacked up, filling in this little nook right here to kind of create a what we're showing here is a classroom, so it creates more of a rectangular square space, whole space, and then the addition where we were proposing your stage up off of the existing gymnasium. So next slide, please. I've also taken the time to do a couple test fit layouts of these areas of these classrooms in particular to show that what we're showing as square footage. Square feet for your second grade classrooms do accommodate your 18 student desks, as well as a teacher's desk and some casework and storage around the perimeter of the room. We've just shown a few different configurations of furniture here to give you an idea of different layouts you could lay these rooms out with. And then we did another option showing your first grade classroom at about 872 square feet with the bathroom built into each option. So again, at that level, first grade, you can get your 18 desks in there, teacher's desk, casework, and your toilet. We also took a little time to do a quick layout of your cafeteria. Again, discussing with Charles, it was determined that we needed about 3 waves of lunch waves in there and approximately 110 seats for students to accommodate those 3 waves. So this layout is showing you one kitchen with an office for the kitchen staff, a server line, a table layout, which will accommodate approximately 12 students. I'll go to the next slide. And Chip. I was going to show you all the pretty pictures, and I get to show you the numbers. What we have done with the drawings that you've seen today, we have quite a few recent projects that I'm with Downs Construction, by the way, and that we have just recently bid within the past couple of weeks. It does reflect a little bit of the tariffs and items like that we've seen. However, we still can't predict what will happen after today. Prime example is, structural steel. We've had post-bid interviews, and then all of a sudden they say your price is good for today or until I get back on the phone with the steel fabricators. So that is always a big question. Just want to make y'all aware of that. But this is recent history. Matter of fact, the steel price that's in here right now, we received on a project a week and a half ago, and just had post-bid reviews with the trade partner last week. So we feel confident in that. These are still very high level. It's just a cost opinion. No firm design has been completed yet. Hopefully both Fryer and ourselves are able to work with you as we move forward with this project. But using, past historical data, elementary schools, those new, which renovate is new. I think we've talked about quite a few times. You end up with essentially a new school, but the outside bones of it are still still intact. New mechanical, it is, the technology and everything is there as a new school would be. Also escalated it out right now until 2027, just for our kind of planning purposes. We're figuring 6% escalation compounded until that time. So right now, the overall project cost with escalation is 47.733. I believe a few months ago, we gave another one. It was right around 37.3 million. Again, this is picking up some of the steel escalation that we've seen in the recent months. With that, there was also the reimbursement rate that you would be getting from the state. I believe currently it's 51%. So, you know, for planning purposes right now, because there's going to be some things that will be deemed ineligible. As Bryce spoke about, DAS is constantly changing what is eligible, what is ineligible. You know, so for planning purposes, you know, I would kind of look at that right now and do a 50-50 split. Hopefully you can go and get that rate increased. But for just these early planning stages, we want to be conservative and make sure everything is there when it comes time to go forward with the voters. Does anybody have any questions?
Style HVAC, heat and AC with.
You know, right now it's essentially undetermined. That price there reflects basically like a VRF system. But right now we're so far out of the design on that, and we have not really sat down, you know, with the mechanical engineers to do a true narrative on that, but it would be replacing all the mechanical systems.
What do I ask on square footage?
Me?
What's the total square footage of the new proposed Valley View with the 3 additions?
Total square foot would be 32,905.
Does that include the 2 basements? And what are the square footages of the 2 basements?
Off the top of my head, I don't know the square footage of the 2 basements, but we have an allowable of 43,458, and we're showing in.
And we're showing that plan 42,905, taking into account that we would have to include at the very least the mechanical room from the basement. We were talking about previously during the walkthrough, we were talking about kind of closing them off similar to what we were doing at Brownstone too.
We have I'm with the garage door and cafeteria, and I'm assuming that's basement or probably some majority of that cafeteria. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Bob will call. How big is it?
Halfway. Not even, I'm gonna say that's no deeper than 20 feet. Deeper towards the office. And then width on that is probably 30, 35, like the width of the cafeteria on top, okay? And then they're only in probably about 20.
Plus the other basement, so we still have a couple thousand anyway, square feet in the basement we have to contend with, correct?
Correct. We'll get a waiver for it from the state through discussions with them, or like we said, lock them off.
There was a walk down into it where there was nothing and it's not being utilized
That's all the electrical.
no, I think what I'm talking about was when we toured the facilities, that it would be very easy to wall that off and not using that. The other ones we were talking about.
Maybe they put it in a different utility room, but it currently has the big pan in the back of the wall. They come to that one. Or is that just on the, or is that
It's
just on the
downstairs.
plumbing? That's
That's,
some meters on the back wall. Is it the water or electrical on the back wall there?
In the,
In the incinerator room, I call it. That's what the door said.
Oh, so yeah, so now we have individual panels
Okay,
that run down the center of the hallway. They're actually in little panel units in the hallway. The largest area is downstairs, which has to do with the solar
okay.
array. That's a separate vaulted room that's down on that side. And then the majority of the other panels are located throughout the school. So there's not really a electrical vault per se, other than that one they did for the solar stuff.
And that could get moved during.
But yeah, we were just into them. You go down the hallway, there's 3 on the left-hand side.
So my next
I'm
question,
covered with posters.
would you still need a utility room in the building?
Yeah, we still have a boiler room, absolutely. Yep.
I'm assuming it's probably gonna be in that centrally located now.
Its location, yeah.
And
Okay,
you're saying that 500 square feet that's not
We
accounted
wouldn't
for
use that.
here is where that would
There's a bit of fluff room, but yeah, exactly, for providing a mechanical room.
because it would fall essentially where you have a classroom on that diagram.
And we were thinking its current location,
Yeah, I think, go back to the picture. Don't you have a classroom right?
next to the floor.
I remember, where's,
There's one more, two more. That one right there.
We're below it.
It's below it. Yeah, yeah. Yep.
Except the individual panels that currently the older ones that are located, which maybe have 25 breakers in the hall.
The day that I took you guys through that.
Yep.
We went through the back wing of the kindergarten. So it was like a, and then we went down just to show you, you could look downstairs and you saw that.
Yeah.
And later, you guys wanted to see the other part. You went down that staircase that.
incinerator?
Yes. Oh,
which could be walled off.
it's just a door.
Because there's no use for an incinerator room.
Well,
And then that came back, up. So right next to that. Little door there, what's there, Ben, is an access to get to the boiler room. To do repairs, if major repairs and stuff like that are needed, they can get equipment in, like when they put the boilers in there before.
through the ramp.
They brought in everything and set their entry up and everything in there.
Got questions?
So my question is, let's say that this committee says this is what the direction we want to go, right? From today, talk us through what to do with your experience consulting with bond counsel, getting things ready for a referendum from November. We hope to get a referendum going forward, grant application deadlines. If everything lines up perfectly, starting with this committee, embracing this, talk us through next steps, the conceptual order of magnitude budget, engaging bond counsel, getting it out to referendum, putting a grant application with the state, then through to a building committee, a clerk of the works, a architect firm to do the full blueprint, through a construction timeline. From today, if everything lined up perfectly, what would our lives look like in Portland for the next 3 years?
You thought you were like, I did.
Evening, everybody. All the grants for this year's construction are due in about 3 weeks. So the state is very busy right now accepting grant applications for all the projects that have passed referendum. The reason I mentioned that is that is the same deadline for next year. So to answer your question, the deadline for this grant is going to be June 30th of next year. So taking that backwards, I think you want to move yourself, the month of June at very least to put together the application again, though you have an experienced staff at actually putting a grant application in. She's been through the process. So it's way less scary, but a month to put together all of the paperwork, considering there's no site acquisition here. It is paperwork. So you want to get into your referendum sometime in the spring, whatever is best for you. And being that we have a full year, the time between now and then is best used explaining this project ad nauseum to the voters so that they understand what you're getting. You understand what that the whole grant is 47 million, what a reimbursement is, what an eligible cost is, what kind of systems are going into the building, how that benefits education, the educating of your voters. You have time now to do that. It's not going to be rushed. Going backwards from that, I think you know that the Board of Education will need to you'll need to complete the education specification and have that voted on. The town then this project and its cost will need to be brought to the selectmen to vote upon, and if they accept to move it to a referendum, then you have
the time between moving it to referendum and the actual referendum is a silent period for the town and the educators to not be spending any municipal money on advertising this project. It's you know, matter of fact stuff. It's this is the size of the building, this is how much it costs, this is what the bond's going to repay. There's nothing else that you can do. So you'll have so going backwards from that, you have to finalize this decision, what you're going to do. A final price that's going to go to referendum, talk to bond counsel to figure out what the language of that is going to be that goes out to the vote. Did I cover about everything that you asked? Okay, so following the referendum, should the referendum pass, prior to June, you go put your application in. You've got 1 year before the money's available for you. So the people that are applying right now, their money becomes available next July for construction. So generally what most towns do is they form their building committee. Building committee advertises for architecture firms and construction managers. And sometimes a clerk of the works or a program manager. You'll bring all of those folks on board, start the design, because you can get reimbursed for the design that's happening before the grant is approved, and you're just taking a partial bond to pay the design professionals and the construction managers for pre-construction services in that year. What they don't let you do is go out to bid with any bid packages to contract. So you can have the construction manager doing pre-construction services, and you can have the architect designing the building, but you can't actually put any bid packages out. So you can't put the roof package out. You can't put, the plumbing package, all that stuff. You have to wait. So what happens is July 1st, the money becomes available. The architect has the project reviewed by the State Department of Administrative Services. They do their final review. They give you a letter that says go out to bid. The construction manager works with the architect, putting together bid packages. Depends on how you're going to deliver the project, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but there's multiple ways to deliver a project contractually. So multiple contractors, one single contractor, construction manager at risk, construction managers as advisors. A bunch of different ways to do that. With the state's letter, you can then put it out to bid. The construction manager sets up on-site trailers. The council or the building committee accepts the bids, votes on it to move forward with. You hire the contractor, sign the contracts, and you go under construction. Project like this, I think we did 18 months. So in the meantime, while all of this is going on, if you have passed your referendum, that is the time to start coming up with your management plan, which is to empty this. And that sounds really easy, but it ain't. It's far from easy. So you're going to have to get the teachers to take all their home goods home or find their new home. You're going to have a plan to have the building emptied out before the contractors come in to start their demolition. Everything moves to their new home. You have a tag sale with everything that's left, however you guys manage the overstock that you're going to end up in that building. And then the building, this is completely emptied out, and you prepare everybody for their 1.5 to 2 year journey where everybody's in Gildersleeve and Brownstone.
And then this conceived all new furniture, all new
Correct.
technology, like a brand new everything.
Everything. Yep, correct.
And all the old furniture we're taking out is got to go to a dumpster or somewhere. Because when we open this thing 18 months from there, and hand over the keys and get the CO, it's brand new.
Correct.
And those are things we definitely want to work through the process with you on what we call the soft cost. And the soft costs are the fees for the design team, the contractor hours are built in there, but it would be, the furnishings and fixtures, technology, other items such as that. Right now, this includes 17%. That's a kind of a fluctuating number that we've been hearing from the state. Kind of the max has been 17, but we have heard they've kind of gone up on that and they kind of go back down on it. So again, when I kind of give you these numbers, it's at the time we submit everything of what DOS's book says at that time.
I got a bunch of questions before we get there. So, who can I start with on? It's probably you, Dr. Britton. So I've gone through all your old ad specs. And I know you said you made the new one within state guidelines. But there's some substantial changes in what our old ed specs that you've produced in the past have. And what the new Valley View model projects for square footage. So I'd like to go through each category, and obviously, when I say grade, I don't get every classroom. We're just going to discuss the grades. I'd like to start with your first page. For kindergarten, you have 6 classrooms. In all of the old ed specs in the town of Portland, we had 1,100 square feet for a kindergarten classroom. In the new ed proposed that we're going to meet, we'll call this proposed because it's in front of me on the screen, shows 950 square feet, which is a reduction of 150 square feet per classroom on just the kindergarten. I have 2 questions, I guess. One, my first question would be, were they inflated before? In other words, did we never need that much square footage, or are we shrinking it to fit this footprint? And is that a good idea? Who shrank these numbers? Because you're going to see when we go through this, and we're going to go through it, there is massive square footage reduced from what we currently have in our ed specs and what is shown today. So,
Bobby, what are our current square footage for classes?
Less. Except for those, the classrooms, some of the large classrooms at Valley View come in at 1450. Those were existing sizes. So some of those preschool sizes 11. So I did look at this, Ben, the square footage to try to relate it back. I did also Gildersleeve and Brownstone. And on average, these here that we're looking at in this configuration are equal to or greater than what we currently have, except for those few classrooms. So like the 1450 classroom, that can be in a new design. If you weren't using it for a kindergarten class, it could be split and made into 2 classes in the same square footage. But with that said, our average square footage in the district for those, believe it or not, our high schools are less than our elementary schools. I was really surprised to do that. So between 680 and 850 is our current average square footage per classroom.
and one of the reasons I bring it up is the state. One of the reasons that these are the square footage that the state they allow up to for a reason, it's because of the class size. We just saw the diagram which shows 18 is getting tight. If we need any room for growth.
Yeah, they're
That's
within
where
200 square feet.
Yes, that's where that additional.
We go from 750 or 680
Yep.
to 800,
Yep.
depending on if it's 18,
Yep.
if it's 20 students. So the square footage that's here, I looked at that, Ben, that fits 22 kids, up to
Right.
22 kids. There's no real shortfall in what the state is saying.
So the next line item is first grade, we cut 100 square feet per classroom under our ed spec. We currently wanted 900, we went down to 800. Under second grade,
What I'm saying.
what's that?
You said first grade? I'm saying 880, 870. It's pretty close.
First grade, under our ed spec, we had 900. And we are going to 800, so it would be 100 reduction.
I got
I'm looking at the square footage.
the smallest.
It looked like 870 to 880. That's really
Okay.
close.
Under, well. You gotta remember, when we need room for growth, I just wanna go through each one and we'll decide, because there's thousands of square feet in town. And when I say thousands, I'm talking closer to 8,000. You go through everything here. Second grade, we lose about 100 a classroom square feet. Visual arts, we had at 1,150. Looks like we go down to 1,000.
1074.
So you're going based on an ed spec, previous ed spec,
Yes.
right? You're not
Yes.
going based on actual. Because we are increasing.
Well, you gotta remember, when we wrote the ed spec,
I'm looking at actual. That's really important.
well,
If we
We have an
if
ed
we made
spec
things
for-
fit for an ed spec, but actual is, we gotta remember that too. I wanna make sure we don't lose that, because
That's
I wanted to
fair.
go measure. That we're saying that we're losing 100 square feet. Well, maybe the way
Maybe we never had it.
figured in an ed
Maybe we
spec, we
never
never
had
had that. We have more.
and that's why I wanna discuss this,
Yeah.
like the library. So we have the library, let's see, or sorry, music class, What are we showing now? Cause I have it reduced to 1,000 square feet.
1,074.
74, okay, still a reduction. Auditorium. Are we down to 5,700-ish? And then under our spec, we were at 63, that includes the gym, that's everything, it includes, and where is, I'm assuming the locker room area, well, the ed spec shows that we have an office and,
Inside the square footage.
but I'm just looking at the rectangle now, I'm just trying to picture where it is, I just don't see where it would go other than in the stage area. These are the things I want to know.
So,
What's that?
Yeah, he's in that corner of the
I
video
mean,
arch.
that maybe Bryson could address that, but I think that that space back there.
Gymnasiums.
This area up here, the 1241 is designated for stage office and storage. So it's included within this.
Right, okay, that's what I want to make sure.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's a discrepancy between the assessors, and I think yours is right. See how you have the original jog going out to the gym? The assessor has it the opposite way on their map, and then so that's just an error, but yours is accurate. I went, well,
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
no, yours is.
It was wrong from the blueprints.
Okay,
Yes.
his is the opposite jog, and I was like, somebody's isn't adding
I
up.
don't know if I've ever seen an assessor's plan that was.
You know, agreed. So the gym, originally we had in our ed spec, once again, 63. And keep in mind, when we wrote that ed spec, it didn't include second grade, it was only up at first, so we're putting another grade in and having a smaller gym. Library and media center,
Wait, sorry, say that again, when, which ed spec?
I haven't
It's out that was only pre-K one, that was.
elementary, let's see, elementary, full day kindergarten. And for juniors and seventh. And these were the specs for the gym size, the cafeteria size, under our specs, and they didn't include second, which then obviously. More square, less.
And Mike had something he wanted to add.
Sure. Mike, go.
You've hit on something that's actually really important, and I want to make sure I address it correctly so that you understand what we did here.
Yep.
Okay, so if you remember back in the day, we were talking about space standards and how the younger kids got X amount of square foot per student. Then as they get older, that size increases. There's a very specific reason for that. Older kids get full-size gyms, older kids get full-size media centers, and the younger kids, they do a lot of the stuff in their rooms. If we were building a brand new, out of the box, pre-K to 2 building, it would not look like this. It looks like this because this is the shape of your existing building and we're trying to save you money. That's why it looks like this.
And just to point out, I'm reading an ed spec that stops at first, so that you can't get any younger.
Right.
K1, and I know we're adding 2 to it. But these are the.
Right.
So that I'm using those.
So, take away the media center, the music rooms and the visual arts and the gymnasium and make bigger classrooms. It would cost more to do that, but the early on in this discussion, in the initial discussions was, do we build a new school or do we renovate buildings? And the difference between a new school and a renovation is that a new school is by far more efficient. Yes, younger students, they generally have a bigger classroom because they have nap time in their room. Here we have a media center and a full-size gym. If this were brand new out of the ground, that gym would be about half the size. It'd be called a multi-purpose room, and that media center wouldn't exist. There would be a hot room or a hot classroom or something like that. So while this is not ideal in the size, the state has taken away the very idea of the individual space standards. You will make a kindergarten 1,100 square feet. That is completely up to the town for these reasons. You have an existing building here that we're going to try to fit out a building. And so we got 6 classrooms in here as close to the square footage as we could, leaving your gym intact, leaving your media center intact, leaving that kitchen and cafeteria full size intact. To lay this out differently and shrink those other rooms would probably be more expensive. So it was not done for any other reason than making this an efficient construction. Will it affect the students' education? No, we specifically did room layouts so you could see that your student population will fit in these rooms.
That's what I'm checking.
Okay, that's what I knew you were asking that, and that's why I wanted to answer it that way.
The layout as
as it is, like looking that first grade is across the hall from preschool, realistically, it might be beneficial to have a special ed classroom or the ABA lab a little bit more accessible to.
100% to answer your question. This is so preliminary. This was a space, this was an exercise to make sure the spaces fit in. Yep.
Move the Jenga pieces only so many ways, and if it doesn't match up how you need it, but it's just.
Right. So no, like this is, like I said, very preliminary. As we go through the process that Mike discussed earlier, when you're working with an architect, yeah, the building committee has an architect on board. They're going to get to have their say and layout, and this is going to be refined probably 10 times. And the puzzle pieces are going to move around until, you know, everyone's happy where everything's located. Just for example, we're showing this corridor in here right now. That could easily be classroom space. But just the way things laid out, that corridor worked out great. And I figured they could be a great pickup and drop off spot, particularly for the preschool students, since they're going to have people coming in and out at all different times of the day. So, but yes, there's tons of flexibility.
For Dr. Britton, and maybe Price, I'm sure you guys have been thinking about it. It's in our strategic priority list. And it came up from the community members a couple of times, which was, are we thinking of, and I know we are, but expanding the possibility of pre-K? It's not possible in this, I get that, and in the future it would have to be some sort of construction project. It's in the future somehow with whatever the state plan, but for all the towns will have to wrestle with that. But how are you? I'm sure you've thought about that in this project.
What these guys can show you, what we did with the last iteration of this exercise was, there's the reason why Valley View is a good pick here is that it's got plenty of room to spread out, right? That you can, and in past iterations, they actually showed some like dotted out areas where you could push the building. If I remember correctly, in the last iteration, you had this going that way.
That's right. That's correct. Yeah.
And then this going this way. So there's lots of ways that if pre-K became full day, or if the enrollment projections are completely wrong and, you know, we need 8 classrooms. That you could build. Now, without question, that would be another expense because you'd have to build, right? I mean, but there's, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys can speak this more. Is the site, is the land adjacent to this school capable of sustaining growth?
Yes.
I just feel like it has to be said.
Right.
Because I know it had come up a couple of times online and other people have approached us about that.
And that should be written in your
We are
expect.
considering it and thinking about it, and that we haven't forgotten to talk about it.
Right.
We should talk about that in the ed spec. It's with the potential to expand.
Yeah, and
So that direction is clear.
right, one of the things that we actually had conceived of originally was making this a pre-K 6 school, right? Because if we were going to do pre-K 6, there would be 5 more classrooms, right? That would have been an even larger school with more students. But the thinking behind that was, if you build a pre-K 6, right, you're going to have more students. You know, keep the reimbursement rate from the state the same. But then if your population grew, or you had pre-K, you can move the 6th grade to the middle school then, and not have to build any more bricks and mortar because it's already built. Now, of course, the cost for the pre-K 5 school was 66 million. Cost for the pre-K 6 school was more than 66 million, which is why people looked at that. So we have to keep the cost down, move the 6th grade up now, build it just within the space standards. But to be fair, there's any growth from here would either have to come from more building.
Right.
But these guys can say that you can plumb it out, like you can set it up for that expansion.
That's exactly what we did the last go around, Charles. Like we had an addition coming off of this side. I think it took a turn, if I remember, but then we had showed in dashed lines off the back the potential to expand off of that building onto the property.
There were 3 ways to grow. It's going to grow out this way, it's going to grow out, back up the hill.
I'm more concerned just making sure all these programs that were on our ed specs are gonna fit in this building, square footage wise, dollar wise, so then when we talk about numbers, we all know. So next one was general education intervention services. I have reading, math, ELL. What are we showing for square footage? It looks like we wanted 1,600 prior when it was up to 1st grade.
So you got 2,000 between the two spaces.
Which spaces are you saying?
Sped, OT, PT.
No, I have a separate for OT and PT.
Okay, so.
This is just reading, math and ELL,
Math is 610.
610. So that's a reduction of 1,000 square feet in that one category. And if you tell me you're the educator, I'm not. If you're telling me that's sufficient, I'm writing it down and I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, if you, this is a pre-K two, for pre-K five, you need to know.
No, this is the 600, sorry, the 16 came from a pre-K one ed spec. You're now adding 2 and you're going from 1,600 down to 600. If you're at 610, if you're telling me that's sufficient, Ben's done talking. 610, you're fine with cutting 1,000 square feet out, and I don't know what those categories are or who they are, but I'm just pointing out that we are reducing it by 1,000 square feet in what we have in our ed spec. And if you tell me we're good.
And here's the other thing I want to, this is an interesting question.
Yeah.
Like 6 classrooms of K 1 and 2. Right now, we have 6 kindergarten classrooms, 5 first grade classrooms, 6 second grade classrooms, 3rd grade 4, 4th grade 4. So if Gildersleeve kids were at this school right now, 2 classrooms would be empty. Right? Because we would need 6, 4, and 4, not 6, 6, 6.
Right.
And that would be a normal year. This process calls for us to look at the enrollment projections and pick the year with the most kids there, which is 6, 6, and 6. In a normal year, it's often 6, 5, 6, 6, 6, 5, some combination. So generally speaking, what happens then is when we go down a class, that class is empty. Like if you go to, if I took you to Valley View right now, I would show you 2 classrooms at Valley View that are empty, or I could show you classrooms at Gildersleeve that an entire classroom is used by a special ed teacher. So it would be no doubt if every class were filled here and both our reading, math and ELL teacher were working in one space of 610, it would be tight. They can make it work. But in a normal year, I would be imagining that a classroom would be empty because we wouldn't need it.
Agreed. And then you put them over there. All I want to do,
That's what we do now.
all I want to do is go through the ed spec and make sure that this facility is going to handle what Portland needs. And then I'll, I'm just gonna, that's all I want to do. I'm not trying to do anything other than, so.
It's a great question.
Back to that one. It shows 4 spaces at 400, and I understand you want to go down to 600 square feet. Should that 600 be 2 spaces at 300? I'm just curious why our ed spec would have had them broken up into multiple spaces, and we're now just saying the heck with the multiple spaces. And I don't even know who these people are or what they're going to be doing with the children. But reality is that's now going to be 1 room instead of 4. And as long as that functions okay, then I'm going to be okay.
For a pre-K 2 school, that would function.
Okay.
Well, and we can ask the educators too.
I just want to point out.
That would function. The ELL teacher is there very limited amount of time. She's going between all 5 buildings at this point.
Yep.
So, I mean.
I'm just pointing
there's
out,
plenty
I can only read
space
these
and room.
and try to picture how it's going to work, and I want it to work for our children. That's all.
I just want to go back to the document that you're looking at, that you keep calling it ed spec. It's a draft that was,
But it also matches our ed spec over here.
I'm saying it's an old draft for a
still-
scenario that never existed. So
It
I,
matches the square footage to our ed specs. It
to our
matches,
pre-K 5 ed specs.
correct,
We needed a different amount of square footage for pre-K 5 students for
but it breaks down each,
ancillary
the
spaces.
nerves. I just want to go through each one because there's certain things that don't change. Like, I think Mike pointed out the gymnasium.
Yeah.
Square footage, he did a nice job. pointing out.
Right, because.
But I think we should go through each one. We gotta make sure we're not missing anything because a lot of things have changed. From our ed spec, the Board of Education has read on each changes and see.
Is like.
That's a draft document, what you're saying.
I know
Square
that,
footage,
like,
the
this.
Education hasn't
Bigger
read.
than this, so we say.
And I just want to make sure we're not missing. That would be.
Right,
optional.
right, so I think that.
So we have a preschool program. Those were good,
I
basically.
mean,
very
maybe
similar.
we need to go look at that because that might put it in perspective.
the ABA lab.
Which classroom?
Where's that on here?
Right next to the media center.
And you have it about 950.
950.
In the ed spec, it was 1 classroom, which is still 1 classroom over that. It's a reduction of 250 square. If you tell me that's normal, fine. But I just want to point out it's a reduction from what we had. How about the rise for, which one's a Gildersleeve and which one is at?
Rise is Gildersleeve.
Right.
Okay, so rise is Gildersleeve, so it would not be there. Curious,
And same with Bridge.
Bridge, well,
Bridge and Rise, those would be different.
right, so would Bridge stay here?
Gildersleeve.
And wouldn't you want to keep the aged children? Isn't one for higher life skills, 50
Yeah,
life skills?
it would all be part of it, yeah.
So there would be younger children at Gildersleeve, what you're picturing
First grade.
in those programs? I'm just trying, aren't they, they're for, obviously it says 5 to 10. I'm going by what's written. The age range is 5 to 10 years old for the program. That's what this.
That's right now who our Bridge program serves. Right now, the Bridge program serves Gildersleeve and Valley, Gildersleeve and Bridge and.
Two through six. Both of those programs, we would have to be going back to the drawing board. Entirely for both of those programs, because with the 6th through 8 coming up here, this being pre-K 2 and again, we haven't talked about Gildersleeve. I'm assuming, right? I'm assuming that then likely the Bridge program and the Rise program would be operating out of Gildersleeve. It would be ABA here, which is currently what we have. We don't have any Valley View students, correct me if I'm wrong, going to Rise or.
No.
And so the second graders moving back here, we would incorporate them into.
An ABA, a different name. I'm just trying to get a handle on how. Yeah, this is what I want to know in order to get to a finish line and the things. So we can skip over the Bridge program. We just talked about that. Let's see, special education resource rooms. We wanted to have 3 at 400 square feet. Here we have, it looks like we have
One
two.
at 14.
It says, I wrote 2. Yeah,
So. Yeah, one at 1456.
no, that's the,
Special. It would be.
that also includes OTPT, and I've got a different category for that, square footage.
Yeah.
So you're at 1400 and that includes the OT, 1456 includes the OT and PT. So we're down to, we need 500 for the PT. So that's a major reduction. So you had 1,200 square feet proposed under education resource room. You've now taken that room and you've added, just so I have it, and I gotta write it down now, you're gonna be adding OT and PT in that same room. And in that same room, under our back, it would have been 2,200 square feet. It would have been 500 for physical therapists, 500 for occupational therapists, and it would have been 1,200 for the other. So it's 2,200. So we're now, and it would have been multiple different rooms. According to that, it would have been 5 rooms total. But the way we had it written, I understand things change. It's 5 rooms at 2,200. We're going down to 1 room at 1,400, and we're good with that. And that will not affect it. Anything in Portland, it's great.
Yeah, it works.
Okay, seems like.
They're almost more than one.
Yeah.
Seems like a big thing. I mean, I personally would, I'd like to see us try and break it up. I just, that one, I can't see a physical therapist working next to an occupational therapist and getting anything done, but.
I agree with you. And that's why I'm happy to hear these guys say that the state has changed its percentages and we can go bigger. Like, we want to get as much space as we can.
Agreed, I was happy to do that.
But at the same time, we've got to work within these spaces because that's what gets us the maximum reimbursement from the state. So I don't want to, and I agree with you. I'm glad you're doing this because I don't want to oversell it. This is going to require change. Teachers in Portland right now, to be fair, are used to a lot of space. We are majorly overbuilt. This is going to require us to do things different, to share, to consolidate, but it's less space to heat, less space to.
I'm not arguing. To put it in perspective, this building alone can house our entire town square footage wise, our student population, 200, what is it, 8,000? Add it up. This building alone, the 2 here, could house everything. High school, middle school could house our entire town, square footage wise, had it been reconfigured. From an educational standpoint.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
it's deceiving.
Right, but we're not doing that.
Looking at pictures of square footage, the square footage for that small room that looks tiny, okay, is only about 80 square feet less than the high school. size classrooms.
For which,
If you stood in the, so we go
The
back to
reading,
the
the EL.
610.
yellow.
The 610, your high schools are 730, they're
Right.
720, and they look big when you stand them. So it's hard to picture. This is a schematic that's put in a layout for us to understand. Those aren't, they're close to, but it's hard when you see that.
I agree.
Darcy said, boy, that room looks half the size, but it's
All I want to do is make sure, number
you're
one, we
right.
didn't miss anything, because a lot of moving.
visually, it looks like, ooh, that's a tiny.
And I want to have a
Right.
conversation, and I want to hear that this is gonna physically function. And then,
And the only other thing I would add, Ben, to this,
Yeah.
and I'm really glad you're asking this quick, because it does
I need to
illustrate
know.
how dramatically overbuilt Portland became when the middle school was at.
Yep.
An entire school was added and no space was reduced, right? But if I remember back, every people around this table can probably remember, Valley View was pre-K two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that long ago, and it operated fine with a couple of portable classrooms, right?
well, that was a whole wing.
I wasn't here for it.
It was a whole wing. It wasn't just a couple. Carl,
I think it was 5.
yeah, it was an entire grade.
Yeah.
That was it was an entire grade. They were put in for my wife's
Yeah,
first grade class, and then when our son went
Second
there,
grade.
and they were supposed to be there 1 year. Then when our son went there, we just said, we got to do something about this.
This brings us back to those days in terms of how it would function, right? I mean.
So, well, there's different programs. I mean, you can admit that things change. There's-
Definitely.
I personally, right up, the only one I'm really struggling with so far is that I think it can be worked on, but I want to point it out. I think it's ridiculous to think we're gonna throw a PT and OT and special education all in one room. And there's gonna be no problem. I'm not an educator, but if you tell me that, then I gotta agree. But I think that's
14.
not, you can break it up, do something,
Petition.
and that's what we're talking about. I'm not trying to kill, I'm trying to point out,
You'd have to petition that.
whatever. I'm just pointing out what I'm seeing here and I want to make sure we meet our ed spec. The new one you're going to write, make sure we're not missing anything, and make sure it's going to physically function in what we're proposing. That's it.
While staying within state space, so we get the maximum reimbursement.
Right, and I understand we're putting it on the lower side, which we're allowed to do. We don't necessarily have to go for the max. And as long as everybody understands that classrooms will get tight if we ever have to, and we are going to be tight. But that's separate. Let's just finish this list because we're.
Just looking, Ben, at what you're talking about, the special ed PTOT, the 1456 square feet, there is that jog in this proposed diagram. I wonder how many extra square feet would be if you just closed up that jog and added that to that section.
And that may be the answer.
Right.
I'm pointing, and those spaces to me, my sister's an OT, I just don't see how. They all work together and play nice in the same room, so. I want to point that out. So let's see, where did we go? We already did the OT, occupational therapist, we covered that. Let's see. Pre-K speech language, where's that going?
Across the hall.
Right across from
Oh, right
PTO2.
there, we have like 317 or something.
337.
Perfect, okay. Main office, you made it a little smaller, I'm fine with that. Where do you get it? I mean, well, you have this totals together, but, is the print, so break down the admin, so I understand where the square footage is going.
Right,
Because obviously there's main office, there's principal, there's, in our case, there's an assistant principal.
They're all them, man.
Conference room, I'm assuming might be in there.
Describe it as this 1,000 square feet. That's your nurse's suite and your teacher workroom / lunchroom. The rest of the admin space is near 1,100 square feet across the hall, which would be your reception.
One at a time. So you have the 1,000 square feet on the right, it's going to be the nurse. We recommend 450, you got that, and then what was the second part?
The workroom / lunchroom.
Teachers, 550, teacher lounge, 550, so you're, yeah.
About this.
Yes, okay, so that's that, and then the left side is going to encompass.
The reception, your principal's office, a conference room. Don't quite remember what else was in there, but. Yeah, your psychologist, yep.
So that one, you're gonna be really, really tight, so. Under our plan, principal's office was 200 state, only can let you go up to.
That's the office, by the way. Yeah.
I said there was a couple errors there. So I do anticipate we'll get that down to the reimbursable number of 150 for the principal. The main office you had at 600, so That would put you at 750, then let's see, we go down to
500.
out of that number.
For this.
So we're reducing, which I'm fine with that. So then you're up to 650. I just want to make sure it all fits. And the conference room, what are we reducing here? It said 2 at 250. I'm assuming we're not doing that.
I think there's one conference room included.
The 250, we keep the 250.
Yeah, I think that's what, I'm trying to find the program sheet that I have.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's plenty of room for a conference room. I just want to make sure this is what this district has in our ed spec is close to what we're trying to put into this. You got the, everybody added up, we have 650 and the 250, the 900, and then did somebody say?
Here we go.
It's like, something else.
So 100, 550 and 500 and 1,050.
Yep, then it fits. Okay, last page, what do we got left?
Yeah, before break, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, just since you're there.
Yeah.
Do you see, as, just based on the school layout that we have, I mean, we have what we have. And what you've put together here, what are the major threats or weaknesses of this that you see? So that we may contend if this is the plan to go with? Or is this pretty good? Like,
I'm pretty, the discussion that Charles, that we had is that the media center may be a little large for this, but that's space that can be, reappropriated elsewhere in the plan. As I think it's a pretty solid plan. I think there's thought put in of how it interacts with the site, how the site circulation works, how the interior, keeping the younger kids away from the old. Not that there's a huge difference between them, but you get your second grader down here, first grader down here, louder spaces down here with your music, arts, and gym. It's a pretty solid plan.
there's no like red flag that we don't see that you see in your business, like based on the skeletons of our building that with this layout.
Mike, red flags.
I'm gonna speak as an engineer now. Low ceilings,
Right.
fresh air, but it's gonna make the campus system for us.
And the media center, what we had talked about with it being larger, we could put a makerspace in there or another conference room. So use that space. It is a large
It is,
library
yeah.
for little guys. But how we use it, whether we create a makerspace, whether we create a lab space, whether we
Right.
create it in the conference room,
Right.
that 26-25 would, and some creative architects to figure this out with us.
Sorry.
No, great question. Cafeteria, we're almost done. Cafeteria. Give the whole number, including the kitchen space, so.
Yes.
Originally, we had kitchen. And the office for the person that runs the kitchen, I'm assuming. At 1,220. And then we had 2,500 for the cafeteria. So it's,
So this would help if you go 2 slides ahead.
But
So this is that layout of, this is the exact square footage that was showing in that plan we were just looking at, just a little more detailed with the tables for the student seating, 112 students, which accommodates 3 waves, as we discussed, with a server to come in here and you're running the kitchen with the office off of it. I don't know exactly what our square footages are here when you break it out into their separate spaces, but when you add it all up, it matches that square footage on the blocking diagram that we were just looking at.
it's just from what we had written, as long as you're telling me it's good. We had 2,500 for the cafeteria with only being 3 grades. Square footage, and we had 1,220 for the kitchen / office, and I know the office is in the 100.
Yeah, this conceptualizes this is no cookie.
Roman kitchen.
So we won't have ovens. It's food will be brought as and want.
Right, so just the seating area, we have a reduction of 250 square feet. Is what I'm getting at, and the kitchen, we have a reduction of 400. And I just want to make sure, and that was only a 3 grade model. I'm curious why we had so much square footage before, when you're talking big money per square foot when you build these things. So either we had them too big before, or we're making them too small now, or they're just right. We've got to, I'm just pointing out the differences.
Jeff wrote.
There you go. Differences from what we expect to what I'm looking at now.
There was no pre-K 1 at ed spec. There is no official document. And I understand you're looking at some old numbers. But
These numbers match our current ed spec per square foot
the
per
current,
grade.
right, but the current ed spec was a pre-K, only approved ed spec was
Yeah.
for pre-K 5.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that the cafeteria would have been bigger to accommodate older children and multiple grades.
This one, which was written by our Board of Education, Dr. Britton, hang on. If you're saying there's a document out there that is misleading
I'm
or
not
inaccurate in
sure.
any way, I want to hear it. I would assume Dr. Britton did a good job on this pre-K 1. Right here. It's a full day kindergarten document. And you wrote it. And it shows the square footage of each classroom. And it currently matches everything in our ed spec.
So there was a time, Ben, where I was playing with a lot of ed specs.
Yes.
I was writing a 4.6, I was writing a pre-K 2,
Yes.
I was writing a pre-K 4.3, pre-K 3, pre-K 6, pre-K 5. There've been lots of drafts that have floated around. The one that we with was a pre-K 5 one, right? And certainly in that one of the big stressors we heard about the pre-K 5 was that, hey, we don't want kids having to start eating lunch at 9:30 in the morning. We need a bigger cafeteria so that we can fit maybe potentially 2 grades in there to get them in. So there have been lots of changes based on the many different iterations of the ed specs plan that we did. So the one we're looking at now, which is the pre-K 2, even this one that Mike and Bryce have worked with, you see it's skeletal. It's like, I think it just, what I'm hoping that this very generic ed specs plan that I didn't even write for Valley View, I just wrote generic, right? To give us a look, gave Mike and Bryce and Chip what they needed to bring you this, which you see tonight, which I believe would work. I believe it would work, and I'm hearing from our architects. It would work. It's what they see in the schools that they've built. Most importantly, for the taxpayers, it's within that allowable square footage, so we can get our full 56% reimbursement from the state, assuming we have open choice students and get the bonuses for the pre-K program. Get that 56% reimbursement to knock down the headline tonight, which is the new number, 47 million, to get a brand new, essentially, Valley View, again, with 56% reimbursement, which means that, yes, we have to downsize. We have to stay in that square footage, or we're not gonna get that 56% reimbursement, which does mean shared spaces. It does mean thinking about how we do things now different. But I'm confident that working with the teachers here, we could make it work and design our schedules and again, $47 million building with the new furniture and the ergonomic designs and the way they build new buildings, it would work. Now, if you're looking at old drafts and square footage is higher or lower, look, that was what we were doing. I was working with the state numbers, I was working with FI, we were throwing things against the wall to see what we got to. And even this, I think this is like a 50,000 foot view. We're gonna have to land the plane on this and fully develop an ed specs plan and eventually, if this goes all the way through, as Mike said, a full architect is gonna be designing, I don't even know how much it costs, $2-3 million blueprint that gets us right down to where all the drops for the things are, right? I mean,
Right, if we go that route, but back to square footage, you mentioned that.
Either way.
I want to get that ironed out. Obviously, we need to know that. So the boiler room and the 2 basements, we're going to need, I know you're claiming, and I know you don't get a vote, but you're claiming we might get a waiver. Are we gonna get a waiver on everything down there?
Don't get a waiver before we block it up. There's plenty of room to put a boiler down there.
Well, wait a minute. You said you couldn't block up Valley View or Brownstone.
There are educational spaces in Brownstone in the basement that makes it harder to tell the state we're using some of it, but not all of it, and we won't access that.
I was gonna say, I said get rid of all the space in the Brownstone. That's what we were talking about before. So you're saying we can block it off, get rid of it.
Whatever we don't need. There's two kind of. Yeah.
What's that?
In the space standard. For corridors and bathrooms and stuff like that in the program. Okay, so yeah, I mean, when we finalized the floor plan, the architect finalized the floor plan, the modern boilers are nothing like the old boilers. They're the size of Coke machines. There's gonna be three small, right, and they're gonna be take up a lot less room. We're gonna have to have an electrical room down there. We're gonna condense that to what is needed for safety and cleanliness and usage, and the rest of that space, if we don't need it for program, can get closed off. Maybe we can get a waiver to use it for school storage, possibly. I have gotten that before down in Southington. I can't guarantee anything. It's all new players since I built the Southington schools. So we're gonna minimize that. There's also in the program diagram, you're gonna see there's a calculation there for shared space for corridors and elevators and things like that. So I mean, I think we're pretty efficient here with the double loaded corridors all the way down. So I think this exercise was, can this program, this school fit into this square footage? Yeah.
Right, and I think.
And the boilers will block off what we need to, what the state tells us. I mean, if it's going to cost us more money to block it off than the reimbursement penalty, we'll have that discussion at that point.
Yep. We're pretty far along. Point is, I'd like, at some point, we need to know what those square footage, I'm just shocked that we've made it to this point. We don't know those square footages. The three areas, the boiler room and the two basements. It's not a big deal. But I want to get it right. I don't want Dr. Britton in any trouble. I want to make sure he's the guy that's got to sign this at the end. If there's square footage that exists, and yes, maybe we're blocking up, maybe we're not, but there's a water main that comes in one. And fine, if you're telling me it can be blocked off, I'll take you on your word. But we need to know if it can't. If we're going to a vote and you're talking thousands of square feet, essentially, and there may be a dollar amount associated with it, or it may put us over the threshold of what's reimbursable or what's not. These are very relevant, and I think we need to iron that out before we.
Yeah, Mike, can I ask a question about that? Because I agree with that, Mike.
I don't want Dr. Britton.
Right, we know Portland law, right? Like Portland got.
All of a sudden, he agrees with Ben. Let me get in trouble.
Yeah, Portland got his hand slapped and almost got stuck with a very large bill for making some mistakes. Right, that's.
Sure.
This is what happened, right? Talk to us about if we were doing this now the right way, the relationship we would develop with DAS and the transparency we would bring to the process. So they know what we're doing before we do it and get ourselves out one.
So back in the day, they used to allow towns to fully design the building, full construction documents, the $2 million documents that Dr. Britton's talking about. Then you go up to the state and get your bond. The problem is you just spent $2 million and there could have been a lot of mistakes on that set of documents. There could be a lot of square footage, all of those things. So the way the process works now is we need to put together our best guess at what this is going to be. If in the ed spec, and in our grant application, it says that we are going to build to 88,000 square feet and not a square foot more. Then you move to the next step. You pass the referendum, you bring on an architect. The building committee has that piece of paper that says you're going to deliver this building for no more than 88,000 square feet. And you're going to take a year to lay this building out and to get it exactly right. That is not the pre-construction task. Unless you guys want to hire us now to design the building, then I'm more than happy to do it. I understand exactly what you're talking about, but you have to understand we're working with parameters here and guidelines, and we're tasked to guide you. And I can tell you that you can build this program into this building definitively. Everyone, we can do it.
I'm seeing that. My point is we made a very big deal out of the brownstone basement, out of certain utilities being in the basement.
Yep.
And the square feet, either if it was the utility coming in, we couldn't necessarily block it off. It might be a liability. I want to know the worst case scenario, what might be a liability to the taxpayers and what may not be.
Sure.
And I'm a big boy. I can handle both. We're not talking about 10,000 hidden square feet. We're talking about a couple thousand.
Right.
I just want to make sure we get this process right. So nobody looks at us and says, how did you do all these building assessments?
Yeah.
Make such a big deal out of the brownstone basement and you didn't even know there was one at the Valley View. It hasn't shown up on our.
Yeah. I think proportionately, they're very, very different things.
I wouldn't argue with that statement, but they exist. And my point is, if it exists on one, it needs to exist on the other, and I need to know what it
But
is.
you were talking about taking the basement at Brownstone. And correct me if I'm wrong here, and turning that over to the town. Am I
No,
correct?
God, no, I never wanted to.
You're talking about that's.
That was the previous section.
With the previous. Yeah.
I wanted to rip all the walls back out the way it used to be, put it back in the stall.
Okay.
But you were saying specifically that this basement situation is very different than the basement situation that you were tasked to deal with in the earlier iterations that did involve handing over a portion to the town and being a portion as curricular space. So I guess, talk us through the situation with the basement here.
Sure.
And what your recommendation would be as we move forward. And I think Charles's point, Dr. Britton's point was that, as we did, in the previous couple of years, meeting with DAS, being transparent with DAS about what we're trying to do, what we're working with, how we'd like to address spaces that might be a little bit tricky is probably the way forward, right? Like, being really open and clear about.
So believe it or not, mechanical spaces are not supposed to be storage rooms. Which is, every district is short of, because of our space standards, there's no storage room. So the mechanical space that you have in this room is storage room, not a mechanical room. What I'm saying is our boiler is going to be so small, we can close all of that in, and that is just going to be unoccupied space. When we talked about Brownstone, we're talking about walkout basement, possible, usable space that's possibly be given over to the town for use, which makes it a mixed use building and a completely different situation than a closing off a little basement.
I specifically asked the Brownstone utility rooms, and you say it doesn't matter the square footage, they count. The boiler room still counts in the square footage of the building, correct or incorrect?
The mechanical room fits in under classification that's in the program that's core factor. So mechanical space.
18% the hallway,
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
But I need to know we have a number, so I need to know that, and does that equate into the dollar to make?
Yes.
Run over.
Right.
If you have the square footage, and I'm not seeing it up there in the number that was read.
Finalize that for you so you can see a square footage of a mechanical room.
Okay, Mr. Down, or it may change his number because we're changing square footage essentially. Maybe. Does that make sense? When you're adding a couple more thousand square feet, you're telling me there's a $0 associated with it, then I'm fine with it. If that's what I'm hearing on the record, I want to hear it. We can move forward. We don't need to spend a night on this. There's a couple thousand square feet that's on it, accounted for, and I want to make sure it's accounted for. And it's junk square footage. I'm not arguing.
The estimate was based on allowable square footage. And that mechanical room fits into the allowable square footage.
About a 500 square foot difference. A proposed space and what's allowed, saying that a mechanical room would fit in that 500 square.
Yes.
Right, that one boiler room is more than 500 square feet. And then that doesn't encompass where, and I don't know if you're moving the water line, maybe you are, maybe you aren't. The water line comes in the other basement. I'm assuming we'd have to then keep that as a mechanical room, maybe. Bottom line is I just want to iron out the square footage. To me, this is like painful. Somebody give me a square footage that we may or may not need. The state may say we need to keep it. That's all I want to hear. So you tell me if you look.
I can't tell you what the state's going to say.
So then you need to just put that square footage in the number and we call it a day. To me, it's a couple thousand square feet. We don't need to go on more than another minute over. I just need to know what the square footage is. That's all I'm asking.
Mike, is that garage underneath Valley View that has no access from the building? Does that count?
If we put up a wall with no door or just a little.
Going to the outside with an overhead door. There is no door. Just an overhead.
No, we'd have to block that off.
The outside.
We'd have to block that off.
That we talked about before, which I'm gonna estimate that was roughly 30 wide or whatever, 35 wide by 20 deep. So let's call that 600 650 square feet. It's no access from that boiler room area, storage area to that area.
If there's no access to it and it's not an occupiable space, it doesn't count toward your space.
For the
So
record, that's the twin space to the one at the brownstone underneath. No other access, garage door, and I said the same thing, just block it up, get rid of it. I just, for the record, I just want to point out apples for apples. And I agree with you, Carl.
That is
Block
the
it off,
space.
get rid of it, whatever. What's
But
that?
why would you have to
There's no
block
other
that off
access.
if you're gonna use, I mean, take the brownstone for
If
example.
they give us an exemption, fine, keep, I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't,
But
that would
I need
never
to know
know
the,
the space.
That was just for tractors and lawn equipment, right?
so was the other one at the brownstone.
But the other one at the
Yeah,
Brown
Valley
Valley,
View.
you can get into the, at Valley View, yeah.
There's no other way in, correct?
No, you have to
Correct.
exit the building and go out through another.
demo.
gate.
I'll tell you I'll give you two examples of projects that I've done and how the state dealt with the crawl space / basement. And these both are schools that were built on hills that had so the idea was I could either come in, build 2 foundation walls, fill it with dirt, pour a slab on top of it, and that wasn't an occupied space. Or it would be a giant occupiable crawl space, which is way less expensive to build than bringing in all that structural fill. So I built it that way, and the state looked at it and said, well, that's occupiable space. So we made it inaccessible except for a couple of access hatches. It's not accessible space. They didn't count it towards the space standard. I've gone through that situation twice, and they said as long as it's only a hatch to get in and out of there to service plumbing and like a pipe chase. It's not an occupiable space. We're not going to count it toward your space standard. Twice we built construction that style. Now you've got an existing situation very much like that. If I only need 500 square feet of that for your new boilers, I'm going to take 500 square feet of that and I'm going to block the rest of it off with just a couple of access panels so that guys can get in there and, if you've got a leaking pipe or something like that. Not accessible space doesn't count toward the space standard. So that is the task of the ed spec. It's the task of the building committee to make sure that happens. It's the task of the architect to make sure that they design it that way. And that is the intention and what is included in our cost estimate. I hope I explained that well this time.
You did. You don't have the final vote on it, so I think we need the square footage, right? And you may still need some of these mechanicals, like where the water line comes in, unless you've already determined all this, you may still need some of that other basement. For the valves to where the water comes into the one, some of the hallway or whatever. My point is. Throw a number on it, please, so we can put this to bed, that's all.
And you can asterisk those 2 areas and just say they're areas in question.
Correct,
So that
just
you know
so
the
we
square-
know that, what if you do come back and say the state says, no, you've got the water line coming in the building, you're gonna leave it a hallway accessible to it, it's good, it's the.
They won't say that.
It can also be access from the outside.
Yeah, it's
That
that
separate-
accessibility for the utilities has to be available from an exterior and an interior.
Right.
Which is good, but that whole loop there would just be really walling off one doorway, which would isolate a little hallway. And the boiler room too. So boiler rooms probably, it's.
Don't you have exit?
You know,
Well, it's probably double the need by the time we're done, and he can wall it all. That's
if
great.
he's gonna be changed, oh, absolutely. But the
Right.
500, I think, with what you're trying to do probably fits. In other words, extra 500. Well,
This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just a crawl space.
Something else, space is ridiculous.
I don't argue with that.
I mean, when you say the water main comes in there, I want to tell you what is there. A shut-off valve and a backflow preventer. And it goes up, and there's no water pumps or anything in that school. That school runs right off of street pressure, nothing like this place has. This is a whole new animal up here.
Oh.
Not that one. None of the other schools
My
have.
point is, even if they just need to leave that corridor, whatever,
Yeah.
there is a chance we are going to need part of that to function as a building in the future. And I'm fine with that, but put a number on it. What you think you're gonna need, that's all. I'm
Yeah, I
not,
think we did.
well, you put 500, I think there's a couple thousand below grade.
And we're not gonna need it all.
You're saying you can handle the 500, but keep in mind, you're not the guy that's gonna pay the bill if it goes over, right? So I just wanna make sure we get it close. Very close.
I'll do my best to make sure it doesn't go over. Sure.
Okay.
Any more questions for Mike? Fires?
Well, yes, because part of our charge, once we get into all the numbers of all these things that we're gonna throw around, and I'm pretty sure we're about to get into that. What part of Mike's charge was to give us the reimbursement numbers, for example. Or Gildersleeve, if we built that route, and Brownstone, if we asked for them. We're gonna need to know ballparks and so you're off the hook for a little bit, but don't go too far.
Got it.
Thank you.
I could. Yeah, I'll lead on that. So as part of the charge and something that I spoke, I think every single meeting about my concerns when we were doing the capital improvement process, that we really have to make sure that we cover our tails on not only escalation, because we were using numbers that were 5 years old, which soon will be 6 years old. And we all agreed upon that. We just couldn't, I didn't have the expertise to figure out what numbers we should be using from the past based on what actually happened in our economy and what we should be using moving forward for everything that I had an estimate on that will need escalation because we're still going to be a year away. So I wanted to try to get a feel for that. And, we talked about getting a second opinion, and that was difficult for me knowing Mike's put so much work into this, but he completely understands. So I reached out to SLAM, which is a very reputable company as well, which does an awful lot of capital improvement programs, an awful lot. Like, they could say we're 50-50. So I wanted to get someone that, Ben, you mentioned many, many times that we need a capital approach to this. So knowing that soft costs are a certain percentage that they use as a standard in the industry to use for projects, which you'll see in the list, which they do. SLAM was able to put together a estimated idea based on using our existing numbers at Gildersleeve. This would refer to any other capital project we looked at, which were all of them. We can easily slide those numbers over. He came up with using the sight lines, using escalation, which is noted in the estimates 10% for 2020, 21 through 21, 20% for 21, 22. That was a huge period of time. Those prices haven't gone away. Everything is kind of stuck. And then 3% thereafter, which is pretty reasonable and right on target based on what we're seeing. So he came up with some escalation costs that we need to add to our number that we have now that we felt was a capital number. We take away from that number, those would take away. We may have to add to that number because he made some points here that I brought up. We're looking at sprinkling in these buildings. There is money in fixturing. There's no money in fixturing. There is a little bit in our capital designs, but there's nothing that he addressed there. But the biggest portion of this is not only the escalation. When you go to page 2, which kind of threw me way out, I knew we were going to be high, but when you go to escalation cost and then you add your soft costs, which are already in renovate to new, we see them broken out, but we don't really pay attention to that. Look at where our prices go. Now we're at $25 million you're adding $10 million to a project. And these are not fictitious numbers. These are estimates that they use in the industry. Now, we've always said there's one important thing that I've always been taught, and Susan's sitting back there because it was a lesson that I learned from her. When you're looking for capital improvement money, you better make sure you have your numbers right because you can't come back for any more. It's just not part of the process. So just think about, I was sick to my stomach at first when you start looking at things because I was thinking about throwing numbers out there for you guys at $15-17 million, and we're actually at 25. Can you imagine building the school and getting $5 million, $6 million off? What would you do? Stop and not finish it? I'm just like, holy moly.
That actually may happen.
Right. But so these are just another approach for you to look at what those soft costs that are included in renovate to new processes would really mean to a capital program that we would put together, because those don't really go away. We still need OEMs. We still need the engineering, we still need the architectural fees, we still need, permitting ways. There's a whole the list of things there. We also, as everybody worried about, was our abatement. Chris has talked about abatement quite a bit. So we had our environmental expert that we contract with go out and take a look at it. And he did find some areas in the windows and stuff that we're going to have to worry about, if we start dismantling those. So he came up with an estimate of $750,000. That would probably be just a little higher. That would replace my 480, whatever we had in there. So some of those things that we didn't want, we had some gray areas. I was not comfortable with those. He addressed those for us. But really, what it comes down to, it kind of verifies what we always talked about, that there is a lot of added cost. Fryer has talked about that for, even in the original building projects, that you got to make sure that you're adding those soft costs onto whatever project you're doing based on the value of the project and what we're going to be doing engineering wise. And that's really a picture of what we're doing. And it almost fits very close to what we talked about before. So all I'm saying is when we're looking at capital improvements, which we've done a pretty extensive job on, if you break those up into phases, that could increase. If you break it up into construction phases or different construction bids or whatever, we can be adding money on there. If we do it all at once, this is primarily kind of where we would be, with escalation in here, with contingency in here as well. And then, obviously you prepare the bids and you do your design, we can go out and you hope you can come under that.
Bob, did you check and see if there's any state reimbursement in this? And if so, what percentage are we looking at?
No, so that is something that Ben just mentioned on Fryer. Every project's going to have a different form of reimbursement. Capital improvements are about at 28%, but there are portions of that project, which would be roofs, HVAC, and some safety components that may gain you more. I think you can't really figure out what that percentage is until they're actually designed.
Right.
But there's potential. First of all, roofs, you're going to get it if it's done properly and you apply for it properly and it meets the criteria that I mentioned about in the package that we had that's been done with estimating. You hope your bid comes in lower, but you still have to agree to those terms to get that reimbursement.
Is there reimbursement and abatement? Speaking of abatements, I would assume there must be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, Mike. I just don't know what percentage, but I know.
No, I'm not asking about
it could be in that. So all that could be put in that 28%.
Right.
But I know there's some portions that we've talked about in the past, roofs, security, some areas that we might get a little more. But
Get a little more, meaning a higher reimbursement
yeah,
rate.
yeah.
The 28.
And those could be big dollar amounts, which would really offset that.
Right.
They could be the big roof for 2 million. They could be, 51%. That's a lot.
So
HVAC. So I don't know what those numbers are.
do you have a breakdown of estimate for Gildersleeve, Brownstone?
No,
Up
but-
here.
No. So I'm not gonna go out and I'm gonna try to have to use something very similar to this because this is very easy to do. All you have to do is change that low and high number to what number we have on the sheet and calculate your bottom.
That's my point. So if at some point, and I'm hearing, at least or reading these emails, that we'd like to get to a conclusion sooner than later. In order to do that, we're gonna need
To
to
work on
know,
what we're gonna do.
we're gonna need to know a number, for example, for Gildersleeve renovation possibly.
So,
Brownstone renovation.
Based on the
possibly.
numbers that we currently have on
Right,
that
Right.
report that I did.
Yeah, and add your percentages to it, and then we have to calculate what we think for reimbursement. If you think the average is gonna be 28, I probably don't argue with that because some are gonna be 0 and some are gonna be 50%.
Yeah, I mean,
You
you take a shot by kind of
but,
moving that number up.
well, that's where Fryer comes in, and part of our charge is Fryer's supposed to
Yeah.
tell us this. I'm not putting Mike on the spot tonight, but.
Can I ask a question about soft costs when they're associated with capital improvement projects? I know my understanding is soft costs with a renovate to new project are not included in your reimbursement rate up until the point that they are assigned a role in the project and then they become eligible.
Right.
Are soft costs treated similarly in a capital project or are they excluded from eligibility?
So the only state grants you're gonna actually go for are the ones that are gonna get reimbursed. So there's a bunch of stuff on there, you know, you're gonna do the floors and the ceilings and the painting and the repointing of the brick and, you know, all that stuff. You're not even gonna go to the state for a grant. It's just gonna be zero. It's just gonna come straight out of capital. For the projects that are reimbursable, the roof replacement, the oil tanks, that kind of stuff, you apply just like you apply for a full-blown school grant, with the exception, it's a non-priority list project. So you don't have the June 30th date to contend with. You could put it in February or March. But it's the same process. They're going to look at, it's 51% of the project, and then you're going to have contingencies which are not eligible until you draw them. You're going to have some certain fees that are not eligible till you draw them. You know, the architectural fees, they're gonna hit you in the audit and let you know. But it works exactly the same way.
And the 28% versus the 51%, because you just said some of these things are going to be eligible for our standard reimbursement rate, but some would only be eligible for a smaller percentage of.
Is that a swag by Slam?
What's that?
The 28%.
No, the 28% and the 51% were kind of the difference between renovate to new and capital improvements.
So it's just being prorated. That a lot, like Ben had said, it's being prorated because a lot of the stuff that was on that capital improvement list was not eligible for reimbursement. There's one of the pages of that Gordian report shows a list of things that looks like it's going to be reimbursable, and the rest of the stuff you're just going to buy it straight out of capital. But like you said, the things that are going to apply is you're going to have a contractor coming out here and setting up general conditions, and have a full-time superintendent out here overseeing it, and you're going to be closing down areas of the building, and so all of the general trade stuff is going to apply. The architectural fees are going to apply if necessary. Those aren't the warning signs for the CIP as I see them. The warning signs for the CIP is you have to keep in mind that Gordian has a unit price book that's the size of the old Webster Dictionary. And it's like a rooftop unit is $5,000, right? That is just the rooftop unit. That is not taking that unit off. That is not putting in new dunnage. That is not, redoing the roof insulation underneath it. It's not running new conduit. It's not running new power. All of that stuff. So whenever you get so Gordian is a pre-bid contract. So those prices are set there. They will give you, so you don't go out to bid for that stuff. You say, Gordian, come on in and fix this for me. And they'll say, you can look at your CIP and they'll say, all right, replacement of a rooftop unit, $5,000. Okay. Well, we also have to redo the roof and the dunnage and the patching and the power and you don't have enough power coming into the building to run these new units. So everything is a domino in construction. That's why Renovate is new, and these alteration projects are a catch-all. And if you try to handle it on a CIP, and you haven't done a full master plan of your CIPs and you've got everything zoned out, right, in 2027 I'm going to do electrical upgrades, in 2028 I'm going to do HVAC, in 2029 I'm going to do roofing. You got to really plan that stuff, because everything in these buildings is related and they'll catch you. So if you're going to follow a CIP, you better have a big contingency. That is my advice.
Yeah, they talked.
That is my strong advice.
So Mike, the reality is, no matter what, there's going to be a CIP of some sort. I haven't heard anybody proposing more than one school to be renovated to potentially new. There are going to be up here, and there's going to be another facility getting renovated. So we're doing a CIP somewhere.
CIP for 5 and 10-year-old buildings, not 50-year-old buildings.
Also, our buildings, you said early on, were C+ and Bs. You typically don't go renovating to new a C+ building either, I would imagine.
Well, jump in, Mike. So I did talk about that with this firm that does capital improvements buildings. And the very beginning of the conversation was 10-minute long, and they said exactly what Mike just said. We're very concerned about, number one, the numbers, because they don't really fit. They fit the book, they don't fit the standard. So make sure you have contingency on that, but they said, you know, they were very concerned that they know when they've seen that we put enough money in. You could save along the way, but don't start as a deficit because that would be a really bad situation. And it has to be a bigger number on this end because of all those things that he mentioned. They were flat out. They said, we could do all that for you too, but you have to understand that because we're only asking, I just asked them to do a little bit for me to kind of get the soft costs in and my escalation costs where they need to be. But they said there could be there's a bubble there where you have to be very careful.
Oh, and I agree.
You kind of want to add, you know, like there's a low end and a high end. It's 7% contingency enough? Absolutely not.
I'm not arguing.
Yeah.
At the point, we're gonna have to write down a dollar.
Can't forget
that
those
we are all
numbers.
comfortable with Per facility, and then we're gonna discuss it. And I
Yeah.
want to get there.
So that's why I did
I
that.
guess one of my, Mike, you triggered a thought. If we were putting in new HVAC, which is a certain percentage, high efficiency bulb, a certain percentage reimbursable, would the wiring then going to it also count as part of that project? I'm just curious. Okay, and obviously, under number 3 of our charge, you're going to be the guy helping us come to a number on each one of these facilities, whether you're the company doing it or not is irrelevant. But you need to help us. That's how I'm seeing it. If I'm wrong, somebody speak up. We're gonna need to conclude with a number soon, according to everybody here, of what Gildersleeve's gonna cost, for example, if we choose, or Brownstone if we choose, or if we choose. You got your renovate to new number, right? So I'd say you iron that one out, and unless somebody wants a different building renovate to new, I think you've got that number covered if we're going that route. But at some point soon, we're going to need a number, and part of your charge is you need to coincide with the project and identify all eligible reimbursements out of whatever number we all have a comfort level. And I think Bob's done an excellent job. I appreciate him reaching out, and it's a dart. I understand we're throwing a dart at the wall. But at some point, in order to conclude this committee, we're going to need to come up with a number for each portion of this and talk about it and vote on it. So how do we get there? That's all.
We need money to do that because we're at the end of our contract.
Well, then we need money to finish it because we're not going to have, we have to finish this.
Can I ask Bob you a question in relation to that? Is it possible, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the disparity between the renovate to new and the capital improvements and this number here at the bottom that Slim has offered this. It's big. And I'm looking, and this is not the latest number that Fryer had given us. This is from February. So I think the new number that they'd given us, the renovate to new Gildersleeve number, the difference is like 10 million. Is it possible? I mean, I know because it's so inflated that how it would be reimbursed, but is it possible that if there was a renovate to new on Gildersleeve that we're talking a difference between? It's very close. I mean,
because of the 51%.
because of the 51%.
That's
I mean,
issue to look at.
that
You
if
need
you-
to look at that. It's like, holy
I feel like
Jesus.
we have to look at that because we're like 10 million off to a renovate to new. If we didn't put a contingency on the high number, you're 10 million off, and that's without putting contingency. And at a 51%, it would, but to Ben's point, I feel like we have to identify those pieces because it could very well be. We're almost neck and neck between the two numbers either way. That's what it feels like right now. I mean, this is wild to me. I mean, this is.
Yeah,
really
and
unexpected.
I did scribble those down and you're
It
absolutely
feels
right.
like someone has to, either Ben says like, we have to get money from the town to put more money in the budget, or we go with Slim or something, because this is wild, like.
Well, keep in
Sort of
mind, if we go,
unexpected.
like, we would have to lop off part of Gildersleeve because it's too big for the square footage for the state reimbursement, which then the renovate, if you want to keep that amount of square footage, the CIP, the capital improvement, you could save that square footage. So you're not apples and. It's apples.
That's the values, Jeff.
Right, you have to,
It would be on the values
right,
of
but you may end up
what's
with an extra, you
necessary
may end up with
now.
an extra 6,000 square feet.
Right.
And pay 10 million less. And keep in mind, at the end of the day, we have to create a number, and we can put a number with each building, and I think what we're gonna see is they're big numbers. You can make them as crazy as you want, or we can get back to the capital numbers, figure out what we want to do with each building, and Bob did an excellent job. And Laurel did an excellent job keeping up with the numbers. And we're gonna have to put a number on each one, because at some point, A lot of this is going to be CIP, whether we like it or not. That's where we're at as a community. Nobody's sitting here saying we're gonna renovate every building to new. I haven't heard that once. I'm hearing maybe one.
No, I'm not saying, I'm not
Right.
proposing anything, I'm just saying. I'm not proposing anything, I'm just saying, when you look at the difference, I mean, what if it's, we're almost at the same. We're $10 million off if we didn't put a cushion in. Based on what Fryer is saying and what Bob is saying. What Slim was saying.
Keep in mind, their numbers of the 47 million may be way off. They may be coming back, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. What?
Why would they be way off?
I don't know. Didn't we just talk
Was it
about?
47 is what
They won't hold steel price more than.
'Cause I don't have
What was your
the-
phrase? My point is,
things could.
anyone, right, whether it's CIP or whether it's renovate to new, there is
So
a chance, we don't know what's gonna happen with there, we don't. There's going to be a chance, either one of them could go up or down, let's be, that's an accurate statement, and we all have to accept that. At some point, we need to put numbers.
Anyways, just something that's recommending, I just feel like,
I
it
love
just
it.
seems wild to me that.
No, I have that written down. You're absolutely right.
Something that we have to.
Is renovate to new times two cheaper in the long run because of the reambrsement than capital?
That's all I
improvement
wanted
And
to-
renovate to new. It's interesting.
Well, ask Mike that, 'cause I think that, Mike, that was kind of your point. At some point, I think, if I remember correctly, like you sort of described Valley View's condition as you almost can't do capital improvements at the extent that you're talking about because of the ripple on effect, right?
Right.
Because, once you take the roof off, then you have to do the exterior shell. Once you do the exterior shell, then you have to do that. It's almost like you're all in.
You're all in.
I gotta speak up. This is. You're knocking on $100 million bill for the town of Portland plus interest if you go down this path.
You are
And
not
it's-
saying anything new, but.
Right, and at some point, we have to get back to the sheet where we went line by line
30 minutes.
and put some escalation on it. And right, like Bob just said, put a number on it. I don't believe the taxpayers want to see $100
How
million.
ineffective that was, we were so off.
What's that?
I mean, we were so on.
No, you're
by
being
doing
like,
that.
I can leave that number as high as.
Okay, prices, but we needed to add escalation and the soft costs.
That's what
You're
I'm saying,
absolutely
we
right.
were. we had
Can't
number
forget
in our
that
head,
happened.
That was wrong, we shouldn't have, I mean, it was.
It's
good for us
important.
to do. I'm not saying it wasn't good for us to do, but to keep that number in our head was.
So what number are you associated, just so we can work back?
It just feels like
What
we
number
have
would you
the
like to
wrong
put on
number.
Gildersleeve for a number for renovation? I'm gonna write each one down. So
Figure 39 million for renovation, right? Roughly.
So when we went through our list and we were around 12 or 13 million. Oh, no, oh, sorry, renovators new. How much for capital improvement?
14,
Okay, 14, so,
which escalation moved it to 21
okay,
and soft costs moved it to 27. It's pretty simple math.
On the low end.
right, but why would we add that much soft cost when it's, I'll give you an example, on the boiler you just did.
No,
At
we,
at the boiler you just did at the Brownstone, how much soft cost was it?
there's that, no, that's in my 14 million.
Correct.
If you look at these line items, these are all your,
Are you getting it? So
your
my point
construction
is-
costs.
Right, we can complicate this as much as we want, but we can simplify as much as we want. If I want to turn this into 100 million, Bob, we could do it tomorrow. If we
I
want to
can-
get back to. the
Listen,
number-
I can bring us back to 28 million as a taxpayer.
Yep.
I can bring you back to the original thing. That's still the cheapest on the table. What I'm trying to do is
That's-
make sure, doesn't matter. What I'm trying to do, just brought numbers up. What I'm trying to do is give you numbers. And I'm way out of my league doing this, and I'm using the professionals to help us. We're zeroing back in on the same number we did. We cannot forget contingency and soft costs for no matter what project we do. However you want to strip that project down, doesn't matter to me. If you want to make Gildersleeve a $9 million project and then add 5 million of soft cost to that and go out that number, that's fine. We have to figure out how we're going to do that. What's 9 million going to get us? A roof? And the parking lot. I don't know. So I'm just putting numbers. I do not want this committee to not have factual numbers based on how you move a project forward for a school, which I've been told by 2 professional groups now that we have to, the contingency, you guys never worried about that. Contingency and soft costs were always in our renovate to new process. Now that we're pulling out of that and we want to do some capital improvements instead, we have to make sure these costs are in there. If you believe them, that's fine. If you don't believe them, that's okay. But I needed to present these costs to you from the professionals. You could say, hey, let's go with 10% less than that. Okay. Well, he actually gave you high and low.
Well, you printed it so small. I can't.
Yeah. So I mean,
I didn't think we could print it.
he used a high and low, you can go with 7% for contingency or 10% for
And my point was,
contingency.
and I think you did a great job.
So, no, I mean, I just want you guys to know that the numbers are there. You have to personally make a decision if you believe them or not. The numbers are there for what we could possibly do for every school going through that process for sightlines to use their numbers. The only thing we can do to get close to save us is to put escalation on those numbers. We talked about that. We did. I only picked one school because it was in the play this day.
All right, so to
We think.
simplify this for me, let's use up
One
here
number.
as an example.
Yep.
What number do you feel comfortable with up here, put on our list? Go to referendum. At some point, we need to go to referendum.
So there's
I'm not
there's
fighting
two
anything.
things for
I'm just
here.
trying to figure out.
And you know my
where-
opinion with others too, but the two things for here, there's two players on that.
Yeah.
So if we are able to use the savings and consolidation as,
Forget all that. I want a dollar amount. I respect.
oh,
that,
then
but
it's
I-
in your,
I
it's
need
in
to
your,
just, let's all get on the same page when it
it's
comes
on the
to-
sidelines report that I did for you.
Still.
Well, it changed a lot.
It did.
Because I
It's
think
high.
Bob's recommendation for what to include in a potential bonding referendum is contingent on us being able to chip
Yeah.
away at some of the bigger items.
When we came up with a $14 million
Well,
number for
using that
this.
logic, we could just chip away at a lot of it. So I just want to be careful. We need to put a dollar amount and then figure out how we're gonna chip away, whatever school it is, whether we're chipping away up here or chipping away at Gildersleeve.
That's about the
or
high
chipping-
school,
Well,
so.
but I
the
want to know the
proposal-
dollar amount up here before we decide on chipping away.
I gave it to you.
So let me write, I'm gonna
I
write
don't
it
have
down.
it here.
Who has the dollar amount that we're going to?
It was around, we got up to around 14 million. My original request was gonna be, I thought if we were able to use some savings and stuff, that 8, we always talked about 8 million.
Well,
That was for here.
Yeah.
right, let's use the if you're comfortable with the 14, I'm
That's
gonna write
roofs
the
and HVAC and.
that we need up here, and I agree with you, and I'm a taxpayer, and I want to see that money put towards paying down whatever, portion. Call it whatever you want. Yeah, I don't care what building it gets thrown at. We got a big bill anyway. Look at this. I just want to be clear, so we're not taking away numbers in one and not the other. I want to be crystal clear on where we stand on each facility and the dollar amount, and then work backwards. That's it. So if you're comfortable with 14, in order to fix these two buildings,
You have the
you're
old
comfortable with
print?
the.
You have my old print? You have the old one that, Nick? Last time we met, I mean, there's been some small changes, but
And
that's all been totaled.
I think you've done an excellent job. I think
No, I
you're doing
get
way
it.
more than you should.
But
be.
you know, there's more numbers out here for everybody to make a decision. I
sit
can't
here-
understand.
The high school and the old one we were looking at, you had 8.1, almost 8.2
It
million.
makes no sense, these numbers.
But that's why I want
They're
to.
huge.
Well, they're gonna be. I mean, we have big square footage, Bob. You know that, I know that. We need money, capital into our buildings.
What really got me going now is the process that I go through. I wasn't part of that as much as I am now. And as I build these possibilities for capital improvements for either school, any school, all schools, including here, whole capital improvement process. How you go to administer that, the costs to, 14, 16 months, 2 years, all that gets added and how you cover that. When you start using estimates to try to capture that cost to make sure that you don't fail miserably, numbers are huge. I'm like, how did we get, obviously you can't renovate 2 for the price of 1. So that's how we drive from what the original building committee did and the $30 million price tag. I'm not even talking about the 68 million, the 30-year note baloney. But how we now try to do this by just closing 1 and try to stay under that number? Absolutely impossible.
Well, keep in mind, we were never gonna stay under that number because they never included the high school and they never had any dollar amount associated with whatever building was getting closed. So that.
But we're
Right,
still
fair,
high now,
fair.
you're
So-
at, even with reimbursement, you're now at 50 million.
But that's where I want,
27.
that's why at some point I want to go through, and obviously the 14 million, Bob, up here, if that's the number we write down, there's going to be a
That's where
certain,
we were at the high school.
whatever, and I think Pryor's gonna have some homework to do after this meeting. He's gonna need to tell me how much of the 14 is potentially reimbursed. And if that's fine. We're gonna have a dollar that we as a
It's
group,
probably easy.
right? And
Than the other ones.
And Mike is going to do an excellent job and say, hey, out of that list up here, it says you're gonna coincide with the project. what's eligible for state reimbursement. You're gonna let us know this. So then when we make a decision, we know out of the 14, we might get back 4, we might get back 5. And then I just write down a dollar amount. At some point, we're gonna need to total this and go to the taxpayers. We're not getting to the finish line without this information.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to simplify this so we can get there and.
So the basis of everything that you're saying is that these costs that came from Gordian are legitimate costs, and they're not. I've said this a few times and I'm going to say it again. These are to replace equipment that's 40 years old, 30 years old, 50 years old, one-on-one swap. You do it every 20 years. That is not the cost of a new HVAC system in a building. That is not the cost to replace a full roof with the abatement. And these are not the true costs of bringing a building up to code. This is a replacement project, and a lot of this equipment you're not even going to be able to buy. So what I did is I took the Gordian report. I escalated it and it's actually my competitor Slam did exactly the same thing that I did. I took these numbers that are not real numbers and I escalated them just to show you what's happening to these numbers. But when you put these projects out to bid, you're not going to find a contractor who's going to come in and replace every one of these units, buy a unit and swap it out for another old unit. It's going to be a brand new HVAC project. There's nobody around it because the energy code will not allow you to do this.
And like I said to Mike,
That's just the way it is. These numbers are not real.
Mike, well, first of all, you took the contract and I hope you read the charges.
I did.
Prioritize the capital improvements needed for each school and compile them into a total bond referendum. Okay,
Correct.
We can't conclude until we do these things. Identify the timeline for the capital improvements with a goal of decommissioning one elementary school. Okay, and I think we've decided that's a good idea. I'm just trying to get to the finish line. You're going to be the guy to help me. So in order to do that, we need to know dollar amounts up here. So I'm not only on this board, I'm also a taxpayer. We're going to need, and I get what you're saying. And if you're saying these numbers are way off, first of all, we were down at much lower and we keep padding them and padding them and padding them. Get to a number you're comfortable, advise us, and we're going to have to sit down as a group and make a conclusion. But at the end of the day, I know you're a renovate to new guy and I'm okay with that. And you said that and I'm good with that. And I think if we do a renovate to new, you're probably our guy. So this has nothing to do with it. My point is there is a lot of capital improvements that are going to be done in this town. Whether you like it or I like it, it's going to happen, period. It's going to happen. There's a lot of problems. I now need to know, and your last charge is to give us an estimate of what is reimbursable and what's not out of this whole list. The only way we're ever going to vote or ever get to a finish line, and I know everybody here wants to get there soon, help us out. I need to know these numbers for each facility, even if they're a little off, build in a little soft. I get all that. I think Bob's done a great job, but in order for us to get to a vote, we need to know what this stuff is or we can't get there. You follow me?
Well, can I maybe frame it this way?
Please.
It sounds like 47 million renovate to new pre-K to Valley View. It's decision one for this committee. 47 million renovate to new based on what you saw here. What's the committee thinking about that?
I don't think we can vote on that when we have repairs.
I'm not asking about it.
You can't make that decision without knowing what the whole district needs. I'll give you an example, Dr. with all due respect. You can't vote on a $47 million price tag if the whole.
I just said, if folks are feeling 47 million, which is the cost, renovate to new pre-K to Valley View, and I'll take the high end, low end, 27 million, these projects at Gildersleeve to create a pre-K 2 brand new $47 million Valley View and $27 million worth of projects at Gildersleeve to create a pre-K 2 school and a 3-5 school. How are you feeling about that committee? Thumbs up, thumbs down, don't like it.
So you're up to 73 million. I don't know the reimbursable number at Gildersleeve yet. At all. It might not be that 27.
Right. to Brett's point, when you're talking 27 million, it might make the most sense to just go all in, renovate to new Gildersleeve as well as Valley View. Then I get it, you're talking about an $88 million project or more.
With all due respect, you want to add $20 million like it's no big deal to the numbers you just said. You gave me 47 million at Valley View, and then you gave me 27 million with major padding at Gildersleeve. And then you want to, just for the heck of it, throw another 20 million on top of it.
So what are you saying is major?
Padding.
But I want, you're putting the contingency money in that, because when we sat here and did the numbers for Gildersleeve, we came up with about 14 million, correct?
For capital?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and now the capital is up to 27.
Right,
So that,
escalation.
correct, and the.
Can't fight that.
I'll use a different word. I won't use padding. Escalation and soft cost.
No,
I'm agreeing.
construction cost and
Yeah,
stuff. You forgot about construction costs.
I'm fine with it.
You should
All
know
I'm
that.
saying is you're taking it, if the number's 27 million.
Yep.
Dr. Britton would like to add or potentially add another 20 million. We haven't even discussed the high school yet. That's all I'm pointing out. And I don't even know out of that 27, how much is reimbursed. Before we make any decision, someone needs to tell me out of the 27 million
28%.
that may potentially, and I think that number is a little high, going into Gildersleeve, how much of that is reimbursable? And nobody here should be, if 7 of it's reimbursable, we're down to 20, then that's a real number. And if out of the 47, you're at 51% reimbursement or 56 with open choice program, but give me real numbers and then we can discuss.
Here are the real numbers that I've seen.
Yep.
47 million at Valley.
After reimbursement, what's the number?
Let's just stick the big number.
Right, on hold.
47, because we went out to referendum with 68 million
Yes.
and the voters voted no. Here we're at 47 million for Valley View plus 27 is $84 million. That doesn't include financing.
No, it
costs.
isn't. That's not 80.
80,
That's not
47 plus 27, I'm sorry, 74 million.
Yeah.
Right. Is this committee comfortable with recommending a $70 million project? It's only gonna go up when we add in the high school.
Absolutely.
It's only going up when we talk
What
about.
are you suggesting? At some point, we have to address.
I'm
I'm
just asking the question, 74 million. That's where, those are the two numbers I've heard today, 27 from Slam, 47 from Fry.
So are you suggesting we don't do the repairs? I don't know. I'm not following. your logic.
I'm
Where's
asking
our
the rest of
number?
the committee here. Where are your heads at? I'm looking at.
You know, what's
John.
interesting, at the last Board of Selectmen, meeting, Rick Shark said that maybe the Board of Selectmen should consider, having the conversation about the one school. Weekend.
And that's funny because the one school was 100 million. By the time you put in the numbers at the high school, hang on, the numbers at the high school and what you're going to do with the other 2 facilities that you close, you're going to break 100 million. And so if that's what we want to laugh about and talk about, so be it. But at the end of the day, we're trying to get this down to a real number that we think the taxpayers will accept.
So I'll say this on that then. Okay, we're gonna throw numbers around. So I will say this. So if say, let's use 30 million, if you were to throw 5 million on that. For the secondary school, you're at 35 million. Okay,
5 minutes, I'm not following.
it's just
5
30 million, go from 28 to 30 million.
What's the 28?
The one process. You're saying that you'd be at 100 million. I'm not, well, watch what I'm doing here. I'm trying to do here that didn't get done initially. Because there's a big difference based on using what we're saving in consolidation and having the agreement with the Board of Select to use it towards whatever we decide to do. It's a huge difference.
Agreed.
It could wipe out $18 million from the taxpayers, which I am one of also. So with that said, you're gonna be at 35 million if you threw 5 million here. If you decided to throw 3, because you've heard this plan from me, okay, you're at 38 million. If 20 million of that,
I'm not following you. Where are you coming up with these numbers? Just so I can follow this.
the original plan was 28 million.
What
33.
original plan?
Well, 33 with,
We're not talking about the original.
no, I don't care. I'm just going.
The
there.
original
I'm just talking about money.
But we can't, but hang on. The original plan is out the
Why?
window.
It's gonna be less for me as a taxpayer.
No, he's at $47 million at Valley View without
I
having the
understand.
rest of the grades
I
there.
did the numbers. You didn't. I did them all. I know right where we
So
are.
what would that new school that you just said cost us?
Which one?
You just said the 28, the
I'm
30
going back to the original one.
correct. So the $33 million school, what do you think that would cost the taxpayers now? First of all, that's
You
not a
asked-
charge. We can't.
I'll tell you what, since you asked all the questions, you tell me, because I know. I know the potential of the money that could be used to pay the bond and savings.
So Bob, what I'm seeing.
I know
I'm
that.
gonna- Bob, what I'm seeing is
You're not telling me.
what I'm seeing is we're not following our charge.
Oh,
No,
yeah, I get that.
You're
I'll
mentioning.
follow any charge I want. We did follow our charge. We're doing
You're
everything we
showing, you're
can.
showing me, and I'm fine with that.
So if you want to talk about the cheapest way for the town, I'm good with that. I don't care. But in what I do, Ben,
Yep.
is you want us to come up with the cheapest number. I'm trying to give you the numbers to make sure you make the right decision. Okay, those numbers are really high now. How can I not say that what is the cheapest way to do things? Well, right now, the only thing we've ever looked at that's cheaper was the original plan. I'm not saying we're gonna do that. I'm just saying we can't forget that. That was 4 years worth of work. That was $33 million.
And what did the taxpayers say?
They said, no, you know why?
Overwhelming.
I'll tell you what.
Tell me what.
Because they weren't given the information related to offsetting the cost of the bond with the consolidation savings. We didn't get there.
That's not true.
Okay.
People saw, what they didn't like, Bob, was the 30-year note. They didn't like
Right,
that
I
many,
know.
they didn't like that many children in one building. These are the conversations that I heard. They didn't like that there was no identified plan with what to do with the other two buildings.
And I
These
didn't
are-
hear
and-
that.
And if any, and Brett would agreed with me on a bunch of those early on, and thank you. Those are all accurate statements. I'm not saying what you're saying is not
Right. I think
valid, but
some of
here's where
those
we're at
didn't
today.
understand that portion of it. And I'm concerned about that because as we move forward, that has to be the central portion of what we're doing. What do we have in cash to pay towards whatever we decide on?
I agree. We
If
need
it's
to, we
50
need,
million, if it's 40 million, you know, what is the taxpayer? At the end game here, John, you know, I talked about this before, is the actual cost on a $30 million bond or whatever we do, actually 8 for the taxpayers because we have, or 18 to 20 million dollars in savings through consolidation to pay towards that bond. We still have to make sure that that's out in front of us, Ben, because if we don't, then
Agreed.
none of these numbers will work. None of them.
no, I agree. You and I are 100%, and I've said it on the record. I do believe that money needs to go towards paying down whatever we can.
Taxpayers need to know
Because
that.
that's 50% real money we're gonna save. I have no issue with that.
You're there.
I want to get back to a real number on each facility so then we can have a hard number to vote on. And we're gonna get there. This is, you know, and Mike's gonna help us because if we use the 27, I think that's a little steep for Gildersleeve, but if we use the 27 on Gildersleeve, I need to know a number of what we think the reimbursement, and both numbers are gonna need to be put in. So then I understand what we go to referendum and what potentially would be the
Why do you
taxpayer
think the
liability.
27 is a little steep?
Because we
high.
identify, what's that?
Well,
There may be little
in
things
there.
that-
You
right,
have to,
right,
you have
and
to
that's
put
fine.
extra in there to
But
make
Bob's
sure you
right.
get to the goal. You hope to save quite a bit.
Right, yeah.
So this number, the 27, on the low side from Slam.
Yeah.
Right.
I think is
You
actually.
have to
about-
hope you're
Yeah,
in that
if you-
7% range, which is pretty low. I don't think the town would ever buy that. I've done a ton.
But you
of
think
projects
this-
that are no
this
less than
range,
10.
27 to 29 million, the 27 is actually probably high. So it's actually probably, we could do.
With that said,
Okay.
with the said that we're using original numbers
Right.
from Sightline that we escalated to hopefully pick up some of the difference in cost, but you're right, it's a faucet for a faucet. It's not a renovate, it's kind of replace. You know, when they made that list, they said you got 15 toilets, you're gonna replace those, this is what it costs.
But
Good flavor.
also just point out too, that when I'm looking at these numbers, you know, they've added an additional 5 million in owner's soft costs, that includes 3.3 million soft costs and only 1.7 contingency. And that's not a huge.
No, he did that
Chunk of
flexible between
contingency.
7 and 10. So on contingency, the town usually works on that 10% side. I'll let you know that.
So Bob,
There's some
looking at
flexibility
this
in that.
list, if you're saying that it might be a little high, what do you think it actually?
Well, I can't. So there's always a percentage in there, Brett, to be on the safe side, especially when you're borrowing. You have to.
But you think the construction costs?
So what I've
soft
seen
costs are.
that we come under, we come under on engineering in this town
Okay.
because we project properly. We save money there.
Okay.
Lots of times they'll use that to expand the projects. But I could never give you a number. Are we 5 or 3 to 5% over? You just don't know because remember, you're looking at this today. We could be going out to bid in a year,
Yeah.
year and a half, 2 years.
So I think what you're saying is it's too hard to even say how we stand if this is the plan for Valley View at 47 million when we don't have the other options. We don't have the other cups to shuffle around to say, well, if we do Valley View at this, and then we could do go to sleep. But maybe if we do Valley View and Brownstone, so until we have more of those cups to shuffle, we can't put a stand on how we feel about it. Look, this is the plan. We see it, we can digest it, and here it is. But I don't, how I stand on it, sure, on paper, that's what it is. Do I think I would move some things around, but I don't think that adjusts the number until we know what more can be done at Gildersleeve, or if we flip it and do it a different way. I don't know that we can answer that question or say we have a stand, like, am I for or against this on paper? Okay, but I don't know the alternative. I don't have anything to compare it to in this moment. Is that?
Yeah, and I think so I would need a few, like, and I don't know if we're gonna go this route, but for example, Valley View, I'd also like, what is the renovate number? And I'll give you an example. If that saves us 10 million, and I know what you're gonna say, Carl, but you're right. There's a value to renovate to new, and I agree with you. I'm not arguing there. But for us to get to a finish line, I just need to see all these numbers, and I may still say, you know what? Doing the 47, I get a higher 56% reimbursement. Show me this number spread out. Like Brett's point, hey, when you start getting close, that's what I want to see. I want us to kind of do after this meeting, if somebody can work on.
You want this for the other schools?
Yeah, so I want a renovate number for each school. And I'm not saying that's going to be my vote, including Valley View. What's the renovate number? And then we already know that, and they did a great job producing it, that it physically functions, and they've sold me that it physically will work at that building. We're tight, but it would physically work, and that helps me. And I want to see the 47 million. I want to see at the 51, and Dr. Britton can weigh in a little bit, whether we're going to get the 51 or the 56% reimbursement, and put a number on it. And then we're going to do.
And maybe some additional reimbursement too, which would be really great. We were following that legislation that looks like there may be additional reimbursement at Valley View for full day pre-K.
Yes.
I'm sorry, not full day kindergarten and pre-K that we would be eligible for.
The other thing we just triggered, they changed the law now, so whatever building we don't use, if we put a roof on it, as long as it's a public building, we would still be eligible for the 51% reimbursement. As long as it's public, they changed it from school to public use, which is a huge change in the statute. So whatever building we choose, that's gonna help us, because we're gonna need a dollar amount with whatever building. We need, at the end of this, we're gonna have to vote on a plan that covers pretty much our plan, so it sells. And if anybody says, well, it's not our charge or any of that, you're right. But I want to finish the statement by saying, look, if we want to sell this to the taxpayers, it better be complete, or to the most complete that we can. And everybody puts it to bed, what each facility will become, blah, 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 a number associated with it, and then we move on. Otherwise, I don't see how we pass this little curve.
Yeah, I guess I would just add to it, and I don't really know exactly what I'm saying here. I get the sticker shock value. But the two numbers we saw tonight, 47 million and 27 million. Let's assume on a good day, we get special legislation. I go talk to Carpino, I go talk to Norm Nealon, I beg them, and they give us 50% of the whole thing. 47 plus 27 is 74. 50% of 74 is 37 million. How are you feeling about that number?
Well,
$37 million. And that doesn't include the high school yet. Let's start there.
At the end of the day, we have large dollar problems.
37 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know what?
Let's
At
go.
the end of the day,
So that's our
I
budget.
don't think, I think it's
You were there.
it's a twofold.
37 million is our budget.
No,
No?
well, first of
40?
all, well, you put in renovate to new in school. So hang on, why don't you, using your analogy again, start breaking it down.
When we started, you were like, we gotta get this full of 15 million.
Yeah, we can get a couple million here or there.
Yeah, and I could sit here and inflate and take things out. We could go back through that list and we could get it to a certain number.
Ben, these are huge numbers. I
You
get,
can-
but are
you
we,
can-
are you there? Are we aware that we're talking 37 to 40 million, 45 million when we talk about bonding costs and the secondary school? These are big numbers. Are we comfortable? Are we all comfortable? Are we aware that this is what we're talking about?
You know enough about any of this?
These are the numbers this is the ballpark.
You were there before, Dr. Britt.
Okay.
What were you at before? What was
So
the?
I just want to make sure that there's an awareness that there's no cheap way through this.
You see.
Well, there's a cheaper and there is a more expensive, and I'm not saying
Either
they're
way,
way
it's still gonna be way more than.
Yeah,
we had.
and it's all not gonna be done at once.
Correct, it's a 4-year project, it's like this, there's no way you're pulling off, we did 20 years of neglect, and at the end of the day, we're going to be fixing it. To my point, up here, if we're renovating up here, which we are, I don't think I've heard anybody say otherwise. We can do that same at every building. We can complicate this as much as we want, we can put in 5 million contingency here and there, we can put 20 million. Or we could sit and start picking numbers per building, like Bob said. And that it could be what we go to referendum on, but at the end of the day, I need to know approximately what we think we're gonna do realistically, a number, what is reimbursable out of that number? And then we go with a dollar amount. I mean, in order for us.
And if that dollar amount comes at or around 37 million, you're gonna be good with that.
So the last meeting we had, Bob threw 44 million for a package deal. And that included about, yeah, and that included Valley View, Gildersleeve. And I think he threw 3 million, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 million at the Brownstone, and then he put some, about 5 million up here. So, what's that?
That was pre that.
Yeah,
Right.
so you're still at 50 and there's potential reimbursement. So my point is, there still is a way cheaper way. If you then, you're adding 10 million to Valley View by renovate to new versus renovate. So we need to know these numbers. This, in order for us to make a conclusion, we need to know the dollar amount. And I'm not saying I have my mind made up in any way. I want to see what the number is after reimbursement for each building. I want to know what we're going to do. And at the end of the day, there's additions being added to Valley View. There's a cost. If you potentially use one of the other buildings, maybe that we obviously know the Brownstone has an excess amount of square footage and already has a sprinkler system. And it just got new boilers. We need to see the numbers. I guarantee if you give me, a couple hours of your time, I could sit down, I could sharpen this thing and if you can get the high school down to 5 million. So I wrote 14 million over here.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question? Mike, how much is Gildersleeve renovate is new, 3 through 5? I'm showing here $39 million. Right?
Although, again,
Total or?
Hold on.
Total.
Total renovate is new.
Yeah, add it.
No, 3 through 5.
We were about 41.9, 42 million.
Okay,
So 42, 47,
so if we take 42, somebody can do the math on this. We take
89,
$89 million,
54% reimbursement.
54 reimbursement. How much is that?
sorry, say that. one more time. What do you want?
If
What was it? 3 to
56,
5?
recommending 56.
Okay, I just want to be consistent.
What were you saying? It's 42 million,
So 42 million for Gildersleeve. All right, I want to run this by the.
estimating 56% reimbursement.
Yeah,
19, so.
and then Valley View.
What is that? 18.5 million.
Okay, so Gildersleeve's 18.5 million. I'm not saying we're doing it, okay? Gildersleeve's 18.5 million, right? That's to the taxpayer, right? Valley View 47 million.
47.7.
Portland will be 20.7.
20.7.
Did you 56% on that or did you 51%?
So you're at 39.3.
To the taxpayer.
And then you still have whatever we do with Brownstone and you still have the
Yep,
second.
that's always the.
So
Okay, hold on a minute. All right. That Brownstone at a 3 through 5 school. Renovate is new.
There were 3 options ranging from 47
Right.
to 49, and I'm sure that they're gotta add a couple extra million at this point.
Including anticipated soft costs,
Yeah, they all.
47,483,570 bucks. Call that $48 million, right? And what?
I had about around 50 million.
We had $50 million number on the
Okay.
average. There's three
All right,
options, so.
okay. So,
Plus or minus 500,000.
So,
Valley View, I'm sorry, just hang on a
no,
second.
you go ahead.
Valley View comes in at 20 million, 20.7 million. And then if we did Brownstone, I'm just trying to run this first of all, okay?
So with 56% reimbursement, you'd be looking at 22 million for this.
This would be 22 million.
And what was Gilding?
Valley View would have been 22.7.
Gilderson was 18.
Yeah.
All right, so
13-ish.
with Gildersleeve and Valley View renovate is new,
39.2 million.
39.2 million. Valley View and Brownstone would be 45.4 million, I believe, or so, right? Am I correct?
Sorry, Gildersleeve and Brownstone
No, Brownstone and Valley View,
would be about 42.7.
42.7 million to the taxpayer, right?
Just renovate to the.
Okay. And then we're still looking at how much up here?
I talked about.
So what Bob is gonna struggle with a little bit is
Very
if we applied the consolidation savings.
Correct.
For 3 years before we moved it over to pay the bond, we get about $3 million paid for.
Yeah.
And then the rest we would need to be figuring out. So 14 probably need to go somewhere between 5 to 8.
There is a lot in that 14, so.
And the other pieces too that
5-8.
Bob's gonna remind us is that we are also hopeful, the legislative session is still going, that those HVAC grants would
Right.
become back available, which would be a
Here.
huge savings, and we should have done that, I mean, but
Agreed.
that could have been a huge,
Right.
could be a huge savings. So it's hard. That secondary school, that 14 million, what we could get in terms of fund overhead savings, and if the HVAC grants become available, could very easily come down to 5. But as it is, at the 14.
So where I'm struggling is that I can, we can run the numbers with the renovate to new and anticipate somewhere around 56% reimbursement, give or take. What I don't know how to do is to estimate what we would be eligible for reimbursement on capital improvements. And I understand the trouble with the numbers. I understand that very clearly, and that's why I think that I don't consider this padding. I think I consider this a more realistic estimate for what a project like this would actually cost, but I really have no concept of how to get to what chunk of that would be reimbursable, because if I'm estimating 28% of the whole thing is reimbursable, well, then that capital improvement project is gonna cost Portland $20 million just for capital improvements at Gildersleeve. That's more than it would cost to do renovate to new project. So
Right.
Well,
but I don't know if estimating 28% on the entire project is in any way realistic.
yeah,
I have no way of understanding. That's where I need help understanding.
That, and Mike, remind us that, is that even possible? Like, cause I keep hearing you say, and it causes me a certain level of anxiety, that even at the 27 million, that might not be enough based on the unit costs and the onions that you start peeling back once you start, I see shaking heads over there, going at it, you might be all in.
I think a healthy way to look at the CIPs to try to divert you away from looking at the Gordian report is to figure out what don't you want to do on those buildings. Because I could look at it that way. All right, we're not gonna do the carpet, we're not gonna paint, we're not gonna replace the toilets, we're just gonna do a roof, we're just gonna do a full brand new HVAC system. We're gonna replace the windows. We're gonna do the parking lot, so we can approach it that way and be correct in our approach to the project. And I know all we're doing, and the only thing that's lend is just took a look at that CIP and went, well, they say swap out the toilet, but do we have to swap out the carriages? Do we have to swap out the pipe that's behind the carriage? Do we have to demo the wall to get to the piping? Do we have to replace the tile that was on that wall? There's a whole thing that, but if you just say, we're going to renovate all the bathrooms in that building to be accessible. We are going to, so if we scope it out that way, which is more consistent with the way we've been doing buildings for, 50 years, state reimbursement ways, we can estimate the reimbursement. I can't estimate it on a CIP because I think when I looked at that, it was maybe 20% of the stuff in there was eligible for reimbursement. It was somewhere that, so it's 20% of 50%.
Well, was that 20% the big ticket items or not? You know what I mean? Like the roof, the HVAC.
It was the big ticket items. Yeah, it was the roof, it was the HVAC, it was the code upgrades. I think those were like the big ticket, and everything else that was on that was just maintenance items so that's why I said we could probably reverse engineer this somehow and come up with a number. But
You've also made it clear you don't typically do the renovate. You do the renovate to new, right?
Simple alteration projects, just straight up I've probably done 2 renovated news in my entire career. Everything else has been an alteration project. But your buildings, because of their age and the maintenance programs, are eligible. The state actually, in order to get granted renovate as new status, we have to do a whole renovate as new report to even be granted that status, because they don't like to renovate things that should have been maintained. That is their whole thing. They're like, we'll give you status as long as you can prove that renovate as new is less expensive than new construction. That is the criteria to get accepted into the renovate as new program. Otherwise, it's just an alterations project. And the alterations projects say, well, we're going to replace the light fixtures, but all the labor and material for that ceiling, that's on you. We're going to replace the roof, but and we'll cover the roof, but we're not going to, after we're done doing the renovations, we're not going to paint the walls. We're not going to replace your carpet. We're not going to replace the plumbing inside, except for just the units that are qualified for accessibility. So that's how that whole thing plays out. So when I looked at the Gordian report, there's a page that breaks out specifically big picture stuff, roof, window replacement, ADA upgrades, those kind of things. And I said, well, those are the eligible pieces. And I think it came out to about, 20% of the whole Gordian report was eligible for reimbursement. So 20, so it's going to be 20% of your 50% is going to be how much the state's going to reimburse you on that. So if you take the $20 million or the $27 million from SLAM and say the state's going to give you $2.7 million, you're going to end up with what, $25 million local share to cover that CIP. And the renovate is new for $25 million is a $50 million project. I'm reverse engineering this for you, but just so you can see the value of the renovate is new. And I understand what you're saying. I do. So we can reverse engineer and just leave stuff out of the project. You just got to be aware that, after you spend $50 million on a building, the public comes in and sees unpainted walls. That's what you're going to be speaking about. So
in your opinion, I'll just ask you the question. Does it make sense to just say, committee, look, penny wise, pound foolish, you're either renovate to new because the CIP doesn't make sense? I'm putting your hand and saying.
It doesn't make sense to me.
The CIP doesn't make sense.
The other escalator that's not on there is that you can't take the CIP all in one project because the building code will not allow you to do that. You do it over the course of 10 years, 15 years.
So just so I understand what you're saying. Do we throw away this building? What would we do if we don't put the money in that's needed? And that's going to be a CIP.
You're going to be maintained once a year. You're going to be going to the selectmen and saying, the Board of Ed needs $2.5 million to replace the rooftop units and replace the lights in classroom 4, 5, 6. We got to do the carpets over. We've got a boiler needs to be replaced. So if you were to put, $2 million a year into the budget, and that's how you would do it.
Okay, so you're saying there's a way to do that to every building, correct? Our buildings are C pluses and Bs. They're not tear downs. We've already gone over this, and I understand we can sit here and go through these numbers in throw another 5 million contingency, this, that.
That's not the point, Ben.
Exactly. The point is the boiler just went at the brownstone. What did we have for a budget number and what did it actually cost us? That's how you get to this finish line. We could sit here and throw ridiculous numbers all day long, or we could say, you know what, we're gonna put 10 million in each building. That's the end.
I believe that if you add up the CIP over 20 years, it equals the bond payment.
Sorry, Mike, I didn't hear you.
Yeah.
If you add up that CIP over the next 20 years, how much you're spending on that CIP once a year for 20 years, and you compare that to what you're paying back on the renovators new bond, it's gonna be the same number. The difference is, in one case, you have a brand new school, and in the other case, you have a school that you've been limping along for, and at the end of 20 years, the rooftop unit you just replaced,
The problem is
That's
we're talking about potentially one renovate to new. If you talk about two, we still have two others. So at some point, their CIPs are going to be occurring the whole way along.
Yeah, okay, so Mike, I don't wanna lose that point that you just said. If the Board of Selectmen said to the Board of Education, we'll give you $5 million a year for the next 15 years to do a CIP. Or we'll give you $3 million a year to pay off a $37 million bond, which is about what it looked like on the amortization table. What's the better approach? I'm asking you, I don't know.
Hey, do you want the students to be living with construction every year, or do you want to rip the bandage? The conclusion to consolidate was a money saving. It wasn't ideal. It was money saving. That was the idea. No matter how you shake this, that $33 million local share, which was advertised as a $66 million project, but it was really a $33 million project to you. That is the fastest, quickest way to get you cheapest, fastest, most efficient way to get you to back to zero.
But that also didn't include up here, and it didn't include what we're doing with the other two the other two buildings. We're trying to come up with a picture.
A $4.7 million cost to knock down to bait and knock down Gildersleeve, leaving you with a ball field.
And you left $10 million bill with what to do with the brownstone, but because the town probably would want to turn it into as a town.
I'm sure. Yep.
My point is, it's still, any way you slice this, there's still big numbers. I think we're going to need to realistically come up with a capital improvement number per facility. Maybe the value number is.
I disagree.
Well, Carl, how do you get the number? You said that the town.
I think that we need, how does this committee feel about two buildings renovated new? Renovated new, let's go there.
What about up here?
We can add that in back.
Okay.
That's a capital improvement. This building is not a renovate as new project. This building is too new for that.
Correct.
The other buildings that we're talking about is either Brownstone and Gildersleeve, Brownstone and Valley View, Gildersleeve and Valley View, or Gildersleeve, or whatever, Valley. So you know what I mean? So let me ask, let me ask this question, because we've been beating this dead horse on capital improvements too long. So let's hear what the committee has to say. Okay, besides you, let's hear what the committee has to say.
You think 50 million is the?
I'm not saying it's $50 million.
Yes, you did.
So I did not say that. Listen to me.
You read your numbers just a few minutes ago.
Well, let's listen. Okay?
42.7
No,
million. You
listen.
read it to me.
That is Valley View and Brownstone.
Correct. And then add
Okay.
whatever you want up here. It's 50 million, Carl.
Gildersleeve and Valley View renovate as new is $39.3 million. Okay?
Add up here. What do you
Total
want up here?
cost, right?
Total cost.
Not including reimbursement. That's important.
No, that is.
No, that's
after.
That's after reimbursement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay?
And then add a number up here.
5 million.
$5 million.
Well, then I'm gonna use that number when we do another spreadsheet, just so you know.
Okay.
Again, I've beat this dead horse for 2.5 years, and I said this. Not the politest way at a previous meeting, but I completely believe that the only way that this is going to fly is that we have to educate the public. We didn't do that the last time around. There were too many major questions. If you look at this in a different perspective, the amount of money that people were being asked to pay for before was substantial. It was consolidating to a single building, which some people just didn't like.
Correct.
And there was no answer provided. It was just shoved under the rug as to what the costs are gonna be for the secondary schools. If we do our homework, and I agree with Ben, we have to, if for no other reason than presenting this to the public and let them understand, and let them watch all these YouTube videos, that we have gone through every number possible and looked at every scenario. But remember, what we provided before was a single building at a substantial cost with no explanation for the secondary school enhancements. If we do this and educate the public appropriately, and even if we're coming in at roughly the same cost or a slight bit more, you have to explain to them that now you're getting 2 brand new schools, not 1.
Right.
And you're getting the enhancements to the secondary school so that this building is repaired. And oh, by the way, and these guys said it, there's a possibility they may not even look at us for a renovate to new because our schools have let go so long. That's the whole other issue on the table here that this town has to wrap their head around. It's got nothing to do with what we're trying to do right now with the schools, and it has everything to do with what we do with our schools once we've repaired it. It's like you hire a landscaper to put in a beautiful lawn, then you don't cut your freaking lawn. Then what good is it? You're doing a whole new lawn again in a couple of years. I believe where I'm trying to go with this is, if we educate and we educate properly, people have to understand that is the number the same or slightly more? Yes. But they're getting 2 brand new buildings and a renovate to a 3rd.
Right.
For roughly the same price that they're being asked for 1 building. And I think that it's all about transparency and education.
And they wanted 2 elementaries.
Exactly.
They did not want that.
Exactly.
You're not gonna renovate 2 buildings for the cost of 1.
And it bothers me, to even, and I was the guy, you watched you were there at the meeting, when they pressed about, I said, guys, no. The Board of Selectmen gave the charge to this committee, and we specifically said, absolutely not, the voters have spoken. You know, and maybe we're going down that road in this country right now where, you know, the vote doesn't matter, but it wasn't a couple hundred votes. It was a substantial vote, whether the education component was there or not. It was a substantial number of people that said no for any number of reasons. But to go back, I think we just have to follow this through from the perspective that the electorate has spoken. They would prefer at least 2 schools. And if we are proposing something where we get our kids in town, have 2 really decent schools, and repairs are made at this one up here. But, and I've said this before, from my perspective, representing, coming from the Board of Selectmen and being a longtime resident and a taxpayer too, we have to be fair. I appreciate what we're doing for our kids. I went to these schools, my parents went to these schools, my grandparents went to these schools, for God's sakes. But we cannot hit taxpayers with such a number that the next time we need to buy a fire truck, the taxpayers say, hell no. So, but getting back to where I started, I think if we've done our homework and we explain it, we educate the public from the perspective that we are giving you potentially 1 brand new building and 1 strategically renovated building, or for the price of saving you $15-18 million, the committee decided to do 2 buildings renovated to new. And oh, by the way, we screwed up. We didn't tell you about, or didn't give you a number for the secondary school repairs. Well, you want to know why this is a little higher? Because that's included. We're finishing it up. You know, and I think that's the way we have to approach it. We have to make sure that education component, no matter what we do, is in there. We don't let it go so long like we did before that our hand is slapped and say, you can't talk about it now.
Capital improvement projects scares me. As a person.
It scares me because you don't know what anything.
We don't know what's gonna happen. We can start this with good intentions and say, I'm just gonna pull numbers out of the sky. It's, $3 million to put on a roof today. $2 million put in today. But we can't afford to do that roof in our capital improvement
Until 5
project
years from
for
now.
5 years from now.
Right.
Well, you start adding escalation costs and soft costs, all that. I'm not comfortable with that because we are gonna be spending more money than we would be, I feel, to renovate 2 buildings as new. Maybe I'm totally way off on this, and maybe I'm over speaking my bounds. And putting $5 million into this, to walk into the taxpayers with a $45 million project. We know our costs. Yes, some are a little bit out of shape up here, but this building was never discussed about renovated as new. It doesn't need to be. My belief, it doesn't need to be renovated as new. That was the high school, middle school. That was done, completed in 2005. We don't need to go down that road again. But we do need some things done. A roof was never put on the high school in that project. I don't know why. Maybe it wouldn't have qualified then. I don't know. Maybe it was cost. Maybe it wasn't ready for a roof. I've been around here a long time. I don't ever remember a roof going on here. You know, they put new boilers in this place in like 88, 80 to 90-ish with those tanks that you just pulled out of the ground. We started and did right after I left.
For the sake, again, just
And I
screaming about this education component, for the sake of being able to explain ourselves.
Right.
For the sake of being able to justify whatever we decide to do. I think what Ben was asking for earlier, I do think, no matter which way we go, it behooves this committee to know what the numbers are on the record for renovate to new and strategic capital for the buildings that we're talking about. I mean, what we've seen for Valley View seems to make sense to me, but I don't think we can say yes to that and isolate that one out and say yes, because the way I look at this, each of these schools are 3 gears and they're all moving in unison together. You have to look at this thing as a package.
I would, can I just add one thing to that? I think maybe if you were gonna make any decision tonight, I have to look to Mike and I put him on the spot. And I said, Mike, does a strategic capital make sense at Gilmers? He said no. The amount you would need to do that over years would be the same amount you'd be paying for a bond, and you're not leveraging your local share against state. Based on what I've learned from Gordian, from Slam, from Fryer, from Bob's look at these things, I think you're at a point where you're renovate to new.
Well, and I agree with you on that building for maybe a slightly different reason. I've always looked at that building as, I don't know if it's the one that needs the most work, maybe, but it is much smaller than Gildersleeve. And by doing a renovate to new, the spaces are smaller, but we are getting, in the final analysis, the maximum amount of usable space and the maximum reimbursement from the state out of that building by doing renovate to new.
Yeah, and I mean, I think where Carl was at before, at 39.3 million, plus 5 million for the secondary school, so at 44.3 million, you're getting Portland 2 brand new elementary schools, essentially. That's what renovate to new is. Two brand new elementary schools and a secondary school that's fixed up that will make your life work for the next 30 years. Right? Now, there is some overhead savings. It's not as much as consolidating to one, but there's some there, right? And to me, but I gotta be honest with you, $44 million is a big number.
It is.
Right?
It is.
It's a jaw-dropping number. This is what I'm saying. It's a jaw-dropping number.
It is.
I don't know how to get that number lower though. I'll tell you, if we're gonna agree with the experts that a CIP doesn't make sense based on the condition of the buildings and the extent of the work and the time it would take.
So, I mean, then what you just said is really very true for me. A capital improvement project staggered out over the next decade to try and fix up Gildersleeve doesn't make sense to me. But I think and maybe this is maybe I shouldn't even ask this, but there's there's the category we haven't really been talking about, which is an alterations project. And so I guess my question is, if a capital improvements project over many years doesn't make sense, might an alterations project that does a really big renovation of the school, but doesn't renovate to new, but gets done some of our top priority items, might that be a way to save some money, but get done the things that we need to get done? And what would that look like?
That actually is kind of almost the reverse engineering that I was speaking on earlier, where we have to scope out an alterations project and know specifically what you're leaving out. I've had districts that say, you know what, we're going to leave out air conditioning because our other elementary schools don't have air conditioning. And I think it's unanimous that that was a bad idea. So I think we can definitely do less expensive buildings that are alterations, but what ends up happening is we can't do this now and not replace the carpet in the media center. All right, let's do a change order to replace the carpet in the media center. All right, we don't really need to paint everything. Oh, you know what? We really need to paint everything. So all of that non-reimbursable stuff starts to come back in, and you don't get reimbursed for it. So we could try scoping something like that out and see what kind of money we can save.
But your gut feeling is that it wouldn't necessarily save that much in the long run because there'd be things that would need to be included that would not be reimbursable.
Yeah. So instead of getting 50 cents on the dollar from the state, you're going to get 35 cents on the dollar from the state because of all the things that are non-reimbursable. This is kind of how that would play out. When we do the cost estimate, we can break out eligible and ineligible costs and then tell you what, so ineligible costs on the renovate is new is off-site work, contingency until you spend it. That was one of those things that tricked everybody last time around. Is it wasn't listed as eligible, so it looked like you weren't going to get reimbursed for it, but you would. So there's a lot of stuff up front that's not reimbursable, but we can. You may have actually already done it. Yeah. So an alterations project is just going through that ineligible list and saying that money is not eligible for reimbursement, and we can figure out what the cost of that is to do the full scope of work. And then, maybe that ineligible stuff you can do on a CIP. One other note on the CIP that I've seen by other, towns hard is that if you come up with a 20-year CIP plan, I don't think you can encumber the money 20 years down the road. You can only, right. So it may not get, the third year of your CIP and it's not getting financed. So that's
Or anybody else, but I thought the capital improvement would be like a 4-year thing. I don't know where we're coming up with.
So if you go to 5-year,
What?
I just gave you a 5-year escalation.
So I think
I
4.
gave you a 5-year escalation on money that we had. 5 years was 5 million on 14 million. Do the calculations. You want to do a $7 million plan, you're still looking at $2.5 to $3 million escalation over 5 years, right off the top. Even if the numbers were good.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I think one of the problems with saying we're going to do it in one project like that is that you can't do it because you're not going to meet building code. Because you're taking it on as a project and not as capital improvements. Capital improvements is maintenance. And if you replace your entire HVAC system, that's going to kick off a ton of building codes that you're going to have to do improvements on. A ton. It's right in the building code. The existing building code says if it's a level 1 alteration, a level 2 alteration, level 3 alteration. As soon as you replace that HVAC system, you're now replacing bathrooms and you're doing handicap parking spots and you're doing fire alarms and you're replacing your energy codes are going to start to kick in. It gets really messy. Honestly, I'm not making that up. It honestly gets messy if you try to take that on as one project. It may as well be a renovate as new or an alterations project.
What moves you from existing to new? The building code, because that's a huge difference in cost. Is it square footage? Is it the percentage of renovation?
So if you use the building code, if you use the building code, it's a new building. If you use the existing building code, there's different levels of restoration. So if we pull a permit to just replace the roof, or if we pull a permit to renovate a kindergarten classroom, you can pull those as things. So the different levels kick in. One is if you renovate more than 50% of the building, or you touch more than 50, you essentially touch 50% of the building. You're replacing your HVAC in whole, or there's another one. And then there's just a full. And so what happens is, at each level, it kicks in. Well, defer to the building code. So Right, that's exactly what happens. So as soon as you hit level 2, you're using the regular building code and you're replacing everything. And that's why the CIPs have to be dragged out for as many years as they do. You could just take a look at the existing building code, look at the alterations level, and you'll see the verbiage on how that works. And that's only a couple of years old, but it definitely affects how we deal with alterations and deal with capital improvement projects. So if you were to bond and then try to do the capital stuff, you can't do, I would approach it as an alteration, like you suggested. And we scope exactly what we're going to do and then list all the ineligibles and figure out what your effective reimbursement rate's going to be. So.
Isn't that what we did when we went through that spreadsheet? We knocked off what we said we could get around or do away with or do later.
So could you use the Gordy spreadsheet of what we, the finalized one to come to that conclusion?
Not the numbers, but the
Not the numbers,
projects.
but the projects we could
If
probably
we
pull.
summarize the projects that were priority items from the list that we went through. Could you potentially take that list of projects and say, if that were an alterations project, here's what you could anticipate as reimbursement and here's what the cost would be?
I square.
I think we can do that.
Based on our current square footage?
Well, that would at least make it all our
Some
work.
of the good stuff are based on square.
Right.
So put in the application to the state, there's a uniform cost schedule that we have to put together that breaks the construction out into its different components. So, this is excavate, site work, excavation, roofing, envelope, but, and then on the side of that, the state has added a column to a standardized format that says eligible and ineligible. All you have to do is pull out all the ineligibles. They come here in one chunk of money. Then your eligibles, you apply your reimbursement rate to, and there's your alterations project. And you don't have to do the ineligible stuff, but sometimes you do for exactly the reasons I just talked about. The building code has kicked in and requires you to do it, or it just makes sense to do it now that, you're mobilized, the contractor's mobilized. You're not going to get a better price than doing it right now, that kind of thing. So, but we could get an effective project by looking at it that way, as opposed to a CIP, because CIP is you hang a brand new toilet on a 50-year-old pipe. There we go.
So
Right.
like on one of the buildings, if we add air conditioning in it, we then need to upgrade the electrical. Can we get the reimbursement on that electrical?
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
Yep.
Because we're gonna have to,
Some of
at
it.
some point to figure out where we're gonna.
Yeah,
do.
depending on which one, right?
Right.
So you have to remember something, and Mike is right there. So we go to an alteration, okay? Is everybody here? Because I am absolutely not. Is everybody here comfortable with making a decision on what you're gonna fix and not for the next 20 years? Just us?
I don't know that, but I mean, at some point.
That's what it's gonna be.
At some point.
Who's gonna pick the list for him
Well,
right now?
Let's start
Other than
with the rooms of the
HVAC,
roof.
that's what I'm saying. That's pretty easy. The outside, but there's a lot.
Like up here, we're gonna do the roof, I think, no matter what.
Education wise,
They have a choice.
yeah.
You don't have a choice.
That's what,
Well, they're gonna get them either way.
certain thing, right.
I mean, we don't probably have to do the middle school side now,
No,
Right.
We
5
don't.
years.
but we don't have.
But what are you
Start
gonna,
out.
right, but we talked about that, right?
I know.
Oh, I'm gonna come to who in 5 years after you're paying a bond?
Because nobody's gonna want to hear about
We
it.
talked
That's
about.
why,
I'm not coming to anybody in 5 years.
that's why I want to throw all this in.
Making sure that we didn't have to come back to the.
But it's
town
another
for
approach.
20 years.
Definitely another approach.
I agree with that.
I can guide you in the direction where I think.
There's reasons why you buy
You should
an
be
expensive
included.
house, take out a mortgage. You don't just pay cash each month. Take out a mortgage. That's how you afford it.
That's our bond.
Yeah, looks great.
What are we gonna do? They want 2 elementary schools. We have a building here that needs, we'll call it $5 million worth of work. We know what we're locked in, we get it done, we do one building project. We get that one open. It's easier than juggling this stuff. Every time we do a capital project, you're looking at a company coming in, resetting up, redoing this. Am I right or wrong in saying that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you just.
It
You're
just
5 million
does.
for the school though, be careful, because you could be at 4 million for the roof.
Right, yeah, I think.
I know,
No,
just.
that's,
If our committee's
Yeah.
recommendation.
the entire 200.
Oh, yeah.
Is to include 5 million for the secondary school complex. I think we need to be really, really clear that the only way that works is if our town is. Like rigidly committed to applying consolidation savings starting next year.
You could do here.
To the secondary complex to start making those improvements.
And
that we're
honestly,
not
I mean,
bond for.
Here is
for short-term residents, especially long-term residents who remember the fiasco with this complex. And they know about the leaking roof at Valley View. I think part of what they need to hear is that not only are we proposing doing these buildings, but we're also proposing on setting up a process moving into the future. So we ensure that the schools don't get this way again. And I think people want to hear that.
That's true. That is true. Well, I mean, I can give you, I know it's 9 o'clock. Okay, we can go. I mean, it seems to me like, again, you're closing in on the renovate to new both Valley View and Gilderson. I can quickly describe to you how it would look in terms of getting there. Like, cause you talk about the fiasco here. We don't want kids going to school on construction, right?
My kid did it.
Yeah.
And they were doing it up here.
The way
4 years.
the way it would seem like it would work would be if everything lines up at some point, empty out Gildersleeve. Move second grade to Valley View and have to rent some portable classrooms for 1 year. 3-5 to Brownstone, 6th grade up, empty out Valley View, do it. Then move pre-K 2 to Gildersleeve, empty out Valley View, do that. Then move everybody back. The good thing is that would give the town 3 years to figure out what to do with Gildersleeve when we're not using it as swing space. My fear is that, of course, we're at the 39.3 million. Yeah, right, Brownstone, we're at, because we have to figure out what to do with Brownstone after the 3 years. My fear is this is a 3 to 5 year proposition. Like, I want to be honest too. Do you think that 39.3 on the taxpayer number is going to hold or is going to go up over that time?
Oh, I just showed you. Yeah, he's
Right. I mean, it's good.
We just did that
It's just like we're gonna do this next year.
even at
Right.
3%.
Next year is
Hang on, I
gonna
wanna
be
hear
the
more.
bonding referendum, the. grant
Actually, with everything, with the
refunds.
craziness with the tariffs and everything right now,
Yeah, I mean.
having that year off might actually allow the dust to settle, to be honest with you.
Well, true, that's true. Maybe. You know, by the time we get
got
going.
the low and the
on
high
this,
end.
we have the President, if this one only admits to serving 2 terms, right? I mean, that's the time we're talking about. There will be a new president by the time we get this going. And maybe he or she might not be as committed to tariffs, who knows, but. It's a long time we're talking about here. That I also have to be honest that by the time you get started on the second school renovate to new. It's gonna be 3 years out and already we saw what happened when Gordian. And we had sticker shock when we saw the Gordian number 5 years ago. Boy, we should have jumped on that right away, right?
And all as the Gordian report was, I'm gonna say it, because I was the one involved in doing it. Is what I was directed to do was to clean up these 5 buildings. We weren't talking about. It's my fault.
I've been telling him that.
It's my fault. We were not talking about closing one elementary school. It was just, we got a lot of repairs to do and do them.
Yeah, and then in terms of process too, I just wanna say, you know, this committee is gonna make a recommendation. That's all it is. It's and out of that recommendation, yeah, we're gonna have to put numbers on it that are backed up by prior and make sense, but the recommendation's gotta go to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education.
Correct.
And we need to build into our timeline that joint meeting too.
Right, they're the ones who are going to, just like they did with the Facility Study Committee, move forward with that plan or recommend adjustments. I mean, Laurel, John, you lived through that last process. I mean, I'm glad you're at the table now because you at least, you know, are aware of what's coming, but you know, we got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do. And things are only getting more expensive. But it begins with, it sounds like you're narrowing in on renovate to new 2 buildings.
We don't, we're, maybe not. We don't know.
We'll
But
get some numbers.
Okay,
See what those
I
numbers
We'll
think-
see what the numbers look like.
I think we're 3 hours into this now. I think we need to tack it in, so we need to pick another date.
Do we have to get, Bob, do you have to figure out, do we have to figure out a way to?
Retire?
No, we're gonna do a
Do we have
raise.
that- do we have
I
that,
thought I did.
do we have a package to continue a funding source to keep right around, or are you? all
Oh,
set to
so
figure
yeah,
that
we'll
out?
talk about that because I know Mike is to the end of what we agreed upon. 'Cause I've been kind of handling your payment recs and
Is that
thank
something
you
we
for
have to
giving
talk about, or you?
a crap load of free time as far as I'm concerned. So thank you for that. And I will go to the record for saying that. Yeah,
Do we have
you
to
don't
go to
really
the
get paid to be
board
here.
to board-
If you're gonna go to the record, don't say crap.
Who do we go to?
That's okay. It's like, that's the safe.
3 hours into this, we're.
Carl got
Nobody
you.
else is-
Be a conversation with.
So yes.
yourself and then-
Okay, but
Yeah.
it goes to the board of selectmen, who do you,
Yeah, well,
has to
oh, so,
approve money?
Well, first of all, we need to know what kind of money.
yeah, we gotta
That's
we gotta
number
work
one.
with him and then see what we're gonna
But
do.
you'll,
because
you're gonna.
These are no easy tasks.
We don't have to do that.
No, no, no.
You'll do that.
When you figure that out, Mike, read what we
No.
gotta conclude.
Yeah.
And make sure,
Just wanna make sure,
I thought that's what I got from 25G or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's close.
That's all.
That was the last.
Pick a date, calendars.
But thank you again.
All right, yeah, what,
Set a meeting.
wait a minute, we need to know,
What was Chris's email first?
Not next week.
Lindy's
week
coming
after.
back? That's important.
That was what I was gonna say.
Thank you.
You get back to 12.
so do we need to go see, before we go any further, we need to go see Mike Pelton, that we need our money for that.
Well, we're gonna have to have that discussion.
When? Are we out? Are we out of money?
Can we
Yeah,
check if
yeah,
we're
we've wrapped
tentatively-
up. We've wrapped up, especially with tonight. We've wrapped up what was left yet. On our existing.
I was just gonna say, we're
$1,000.
looking 2 weeks out, and I realize that the further we get into summer, and we're gonna run into people's vacation schedules, and that's gonna be really challenging, so I think the sooner the better. Then Juneteenth is the 19th, which would be the Thursday that week when we were typically meeting, so I don't think that's a good date to meet. But if Monday evening works for folks, Monday the 16th is 2 weeks from now.
13.
I don't know how that would
Last
work.
day is the 17th. The 16th would likely be the best because we know teachers are still here teaching.
Mhm.
until
That works for me.
I would. I know folks are getting a little tired and vacation after June, scheduling becomes a nightmare because people are at Cape Cod and.
That's why I was trying to button this
So
thing up.
I really see the 9th or the 16th as our two last best chances to get us
So
together.
I'm only saying the 16th because I know Chris is out of town through the 12th. So if we were hoping to get everyone together, and I know,
There's just field days and stuff going. So that's no impact. We're gone, but after all the field day and that's because I'm.
The only thing with the 9th is I will have to call in remotely. I'll be in Virginia.
Hopefully golfing.
That's.
How about the 16th?
Only if you're golf.
Babysitting the kids.
Okay, only if you're golf.
No, I'm babysitting the grandkids. So, but I can call in. That's not a problem. I'll bring a laptop with me. I'll call.
At Busch Gardens or?
No.
Okay.
Oh, so that's. So the
My
9th.
5-year-old and my 1-year-old grandchild,
Yeah,
my
it
wife and
can't
I
be
have
the
them for
9th
4
because-
days.
That's
it
eighth.
should be the 9th.
It's
because,
8th grade awards.
Well, and also, Chris is out of town that week, so if we're trying to
So-
make sure everyone's in the room.
Are we
16th,
all gonna try for the 16th?
Yeah.
16th, that's a Monday, right?
Yep, I already got that on
That's when we
hold.
should.
Some Monday night.
6 P.M.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. 6 to about 1 a.m., 2 a.m.
Is everybody good with that?
Yeah, can I just ask for the good of the order? Do you have any homework to do the Serrano, well, we clear on what our homework assignment is.
As much reimbursement numbers in order to prove what path we should go. And I'm saying that open-minded, so somebody needs to.
We
work
just
on-
need to justify our decision. and the
Correct.
Numbers.
Somebody needs to show,
Ryan, put reimbursement numbers on a
so I'll give you
Some of the
the,
CIPs.
CIP's got.
yes.
but not a CIP, not
Oh,
a
sorry.
stretched over 10 years CIP. I think if we want to take the projects that we'd identified as top priority when we were going through that list and say, if we were to make an alterations project out of this, how much could we anticipate in reimbursement?
You know, that's gonna be a hope for them. Because remember, all your design work and everything has to be done, and then you have to go to the state and they decide.
Right.
Well, even if
They
they go
just
for the
want
low lying fruit.
Right. The stuff that's almost a gimmick.
Right.
I think
Yeah,
the stuff that could be questionable, we gotta be very careful.
Agreed.
So you're gonna get to the table and they're gonna be like.
I want to make sure that I belong.
It's not a fair request. I don't want to ask for something that's not fair, but I think that the idea of stretching capital improvements over a decade, it's just a non-starter for me.
That would-
So I.
I think
5 years.
Yeah.
5 years max.
Right.
But if we were trying to tackle it as an alterations.
Do the
project
alterations
that
for
we are
5 years.
Seeking reimbursement for.
So I don't need to do anything for value. Everybody's got all the information, is comfortable with all the numbers on value.
Other than the renovate side of it, show me the reimbursement. We haven't discussed that on the table. I need to know in order to conclude which one. Show me the renovation number and the actual cost to me. Which
For
I haven't-
value.
Yes, please. You show me the renovate to new, show me the renovate.
You want me to add.
With
stuff
everything
onto
in,
my
yeah.
notes.
So,
We're
so,
talking
with-
about
Yeah,
alteration.
I get what you're saying.
okay.
Yeah, add on to your
Let me say
numbers.
this, so with that, what you're asking for at Valley View, they've basically taken that building, gutted it to the exterior shell, redesigned it to fit
Second grade.
a pre-K through second grade.
Yeah, I got that number.
Yeah.
With capital improvements,
You won't get the classroom.
that can't be that. That is going to be, correct me if I'm wrong. That is going to be taking the building, not gutting the interior, taking that building and probably putting an addition on it.
Okay, so take that one off the list then.
Right,
and
yeah,
show
Carl's,
me-
you're right, the only way to make Valley View a free K two
Okay,
is renovation.
so then save yourself time. Then give me
Okay.
the
Kinda
two
what
numbers, the
tried to go.
Brownstone.
Brownstone and Gildersleeve.
Well, if you're telling me
Yes.
renovated, it doesn't physically work, then let's not.
So you-
What Bryce and
You have
Mike
Gildersleeve.
and Chip did was took
Yeah.
that building, right?
You do whatever you want with it.
Gutted
Right,
it, you know,
right.
and
And
made
it's somewhere
smaller
in there.
classrooms, but were
I get-
still
I get-
bigger than a lot
Bigger
of,
than we want.
than our regular schools had and worked perfect.
Category.
So figure out what the
So
reimbursement
that's-
on the 27 million as an alterations project in one bite would be
Not at Valley View,
at Gildersleeve and
We already-
Brownstone.
at Brownstone
Yes.
and
We
Gildersleeve,
did.
correct? Is that what you're
So
asking?
we do Gildersleeve.
Brownstone Guild.
You're good, you're good with Valley View.
And not work on this.
That makes sense.
I know what we're gonna do.
Valley
We're gonna
View,
take-
we are good with.
We're gonna add it. Yeah, I got it.
Renovate is new,
Just gotta do Brownstone the same way.
we like that, right?
Because they have a totally.
We do, I mean, that's
We,
gonna
we
come.
know,
to-
we know that.
We know that number, we feel that's fair because it fits everybody in. We may wanna. What did you call that project? It's not through alterations. But the Board of Selectmen needs to understand with alterations that
You get less.
they're not gonna get everything that they're getting at Valley View.
Correct.
Correct.
They need to know that, they're not getting,
And they have to plan for significant continued capital improvements. or
yes,
maintenance
and the
budget.
whole enchilada is not gonna be.
Short term.
Yeah,
They
it's
can't
not gonna
put it
be.
off. They
200.
So as long as they know that
have
and.
history.
100 and-
And we need.
Somebody's gonna come back to them and say, in 5 years, we need more money.
And keep in mind, 208,000 of our square footage is up here. We have to do a better job of capital. That's why I wanted to, the decision we make at the end. The overwhelming majority of our square footage is right here.
You're not trying to represent, we're not.
Okay.
It's no.
And then.
Yeah.
Carl, someone also has 30 minutes, I was here.
Considering, yes.
16.
With my wife's retiring and we're gonna do
We'll
stuff
let
now.
Michelle know, hopefully she can help us.
And
Yeah.
You don't like the thankless job, John?
I just want to be able to say, okay, we're gonna go away next week and not have to look at all the meetings I've got to plan around.
Public comment?
Yeah. I don't know. It's
Any public comment?
100% yet.
Well, they're all.
Is there anybody on there for public comment?
They get no word if they stay.
I would make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?